Alrighty, sorry about the delay. Welcome back to another thrilling episode of Free Read Fridays. I am your intrepid narrator, Fragath, and today we're going to be reading more of the Jesus incident by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. I did some quick image editing there so that I didn't have someone's name on there that wasn't me. This cover image, was for an audiobook edition. Let me find what the actual name was real quick. Here we go. Book covers. Jesus Incident. I don't remember what that one was called. The image formerly said, read by Scott Brick. I did, as you can see, a very quick edit in the last 5 minutes to make that less so. Anyway, that is a very low resolution image, but it is moderately appropriate for what we're about to be doing. I did like that one though. So few of these covers show anything to do with the highlighters, and the highlighters are fairly important to the plot. And indeed the ecology at large of Pandora. So, previously on, Legata Hamill has confirmed that indeed Oakes has done something unpleasant, that the Scream Room was highly unpleasant. What exactly she did in the Scream Room, she now knows. She watched the hologram, um, which involved all kinds of moderately horrifying brainwashing sexy time type activities. Pretty nasty stuff. But she didn't really partake. She didn't do anything there that would increase her own pleasure. She just helped others, um, which means that there isn't the same lever over her. Oakes does not have quite the same lever over her as he would other people. Um, so she's decided to dig up dirt on Oakes. Well, it turns out that despite Oakes's rhetoric about clones being property, he's a clone. He didn't necessarily know this. At least we don't think he knows this. Um, and even if he did, he'd probably deny it, because if you start talking about making human-shaped objects into property, generally you're not going to say, oh, I'm the kind of human-shaped object that would be turned into property. That's just not how that game is played, in my experience, regrettably, or what have you. Let's see, where did I have my breakout point for next week? This should be the penultimate episode of the Jesus incident. That is the plan. Let's see, that's 342 to what? 416. Let's shift that a chapter. That'll be a little more even-handed. Next week will still be a bit long. Actually, this week's going to be kind of long too, given that that's going to be like, jeez, it's kind of going to be long either way. But we'll see. So other plot developments. Yes, right. So the experiment that Raj Thomas, Kerro Panille, and Waela have gone on, they made an attempt. They started trying to communicate with the kelp, but unfortunately the sabotage kicked in. And instead of being something directly associated with the sub/bathysphere itself, it was actually to do with their lighter than air, their LTA, the blimp dirigible thing that they were hooked to in their bathyscaphe arrangement, which would lift them out. So that collapsed in on top of them, and so they float to the surface. they jettison ballast and float to the surface, and it turns out there's another trap in the hatch, which they is like the poison packet or poison gas of some kind, which they throw out of the sub. They disarm and throw out of the sub, and the kelp does not like this. But neither do the Hylighters, um, which are floating closer and closer and closer. They, start banging them with rocks. And Kerro Panille is like, oh, these things are the best. Look at these things. They're awesome. Just look at them. How cool are these? And then, of course, they yank him right out of the sub. So that's about where we leave it, and where we will pick up. I think we go straight to it right after a brief interlude. And then I think we go to Kerro Panille's perspective. We're going to learn a few things. Oh boy, are we. This is where the action in the book starts ramping up in a big way. It's been sort of like, well, okay, things are happening, but it's not really actiony. Well, you're about to get your wish if you were hoping for more, because it's coming. Alrighty, give me a sec to get some more water in me, and we will get crack-a-lackin' and start reading more of The Jesus Incident. In your terms, self may be called Avata. Not highlighter, not kelp, not electro-kelp, but Avata. That is the great self in the language from your animal past. Avata. Finding this label in you, Avata knows we sing the same song. Through each other, Avata and human know self. No second measurement for Avata. Same value every time. No separate qualities or forms. Thus with human. Avata, but not Avata. To name is to limit, to control. To name without knowing your limit is to hinder the knowing. At best, it is a diversion. At worst, it is a misrepresentation, a stolen label, a death. To name a thing falsely and to act thereafter on the name, that is killing, a cutting of the spiritual leaf, the death of the stem. A thing is self or it is other. The naming is a matter of proximity. Avata identifies the species-fold magnetification, the magnetism of proximity, the wavelength of space. Human Thomas, human Kerro, human Jessup, human Oakes. Avata concludes lack of sensory organ necessary to differentiate between clone and human. Avata does not consider this lack a weakness or misrepresentation. Avata is one in highlighter and kelp, not separate in either, nor the same. Cells differ but share the one. Before humans, Avata did not distinguish. Both are self. Avata would teach you the self of other, the human in clone. Some things are because you name them. You perpetuate them in your language. You commiserate over the woe they have wrought you. Say simply that these things are not so. Do not change the label, but the labelness. Eliminate them from your life by washing them first from your tongue. Ignoring that which is false is also a knowing. Thus, learning. To learn is to grow, and to grow is to live. You may practice forgetting, and thus learn. Home. That is your label for this place, human Kerro. Avata washes your tongue here that you may properly inflect the name, and then forget it.
Avata brings you this to cleanse you of expectancies, that you may learn the cues to which Avata responds or refuses to respond. This is how you learn Avata. You are both lower level and higher level, and the continuity is the continuity of your will. Observe the vine which is all Avata winding through home. Grasp the vine. Cup the waters in your hands and drink. You are the observer effect. Kerro Panille. Translations from the Avata. And the Lord God said, Behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand, and take also of the tree of life, and eat, and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the garden of Eden, to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the garden of Eden cherubims, and a flaming sword which turned every way, to keep the way of the tree of life. Christian Book of the Dead. Ship Records. For Kerro Panille, his last sensible thought was the beauty of the lead highlighter passing within 2 meters overhead. He felt the presence of the sea and the wind, saw the black twisting mass of tendrils and the long rope of them which he knew linked the magnificent creature to its ballast rock. Then he was knocked off his feet and clutched at the only possible handhold, that long rope of guiding tendrils. From his study of them, Panille knew that the creatures were considered to be dangerously hallucinogenic, explosive, and poisonous to shipmen, but nothing could have prepared him for the actual experience. As his hand touched the highlighter, he experienced an electric buzzing which climbed to a crescendo in every sense of his body. He tasted bitter iron. The musk of uncounted flowers savaged his nostrils. His ears were the citadel of the fiercest attack. Cymbals and twanging strings competed with horns and the cries of birds. Behind this assault he heard the choral singing of a multitude. Then his sense of balance went crazy. Silence. The sensations were turned off as though by a switch. Am I dead? Is this real? You live, human Kerro. In a way, it was like the voice of Ship. It was calm, faintly amused, and he knew it occurred only in his head. How do I know that? Because you are a poet. Who are you? I am that which you call Hylighters. I save you from the sea. The beautiful, yes, the beautiful, gorgeous, magnificent Hylighters. There was pride in this announcement, but still that sense of amusement. You called me human Kerro. Yes, human Kerro poet. What does being a poet have to do with my knowing this is real? Because you trust your senses. As though these words opened a door to his body, he felt the enclosing tendrils, the sharp bite of wind between them, and his inner ears registered the roll of a sweeping turn as the highlighter tacked. His eyes reported a shadowy golden area millimeters from his nose, and he knew he lay on his back in a cradle of tendrils, the body of the highlighter close above him. What did you do to me? I touched your being. How? Again he experienced the savage assault on his senses, but this time there was pattern in it. He detected bursts of modulation too fast for him to separate into coherent bits. His sense of sight registered pictures, and he knew he was looking down with highlighter vision upon the sea, and the gondola from which he had been snatched. He felt that he must cling to these sensations as he clung to his sanity. Madness lurked at the edges of his awareness. And once more the assault stopped with shocking abruptness. Panille lay gasping. It was like being immersed in all the most beautiful poetry that humankind had ever produced, everything simultaneous. You are my first poet, and all poets are known through you. Panille sensed an elemental truth in this. What are you doing with me? He asked. It was very much like talking to Ship in his head. I strive to prevent the death of human and of self. That was reasonable. Panille could make no response to this. All the thoughts which occurred to him felt inadequate. Poison from the gondola had killed kelp. The Hylighters, known to originate in the sea, obviously resented this. Yet this Hylighter would save a human. It occurred to him then that he was talking to a source which could explain the relationship between kelp and Hylighter. Before he could think through his question, the voice filled his head, a single thought burst. Hylighter self, kelp self, all one. It was like Ship asking him about God. He sensed another elemental truth. Poet knows. This thought twined around in his mind until he could not tell if it originated with the Hylighter or with himself. Poet knows. Poet knows. That's Knows. Panille felt himself washed in this thought. It was still with him when he realized that he was conversing with the Hylighter in no language he could recall. The thoughts occurred, he understood them, but of all the languages he knew, none coincided with the structure of this exchange. Human Kerro, you speak the forgotten language of your animal past. As I speak rock, you speak this language. Before Panille could respond, he felt the tendrils opening around him. It was a most curious sensation. He was both the tendrils and himself, and he knew he was clinging to the Avata as he was clinging to his own sanity. Curiosity was his grip upon his being. How curious this experience! What poetry it would make! Then he knew he was being dangled over the sea. The foam at the edge of a kelp's fan leaf caught his attention and held it. He was not afraid. There was only that enormous curiosity. He wanted to drink in everything that was happening and preserve it to share with others. Wind whipped past him. He smelled it, saw it, felt it. He was turning in the grasp of the Hylighter, and he saw a mounded mass of Hylighters directly below. They opened like flower petals, expanding to reveal the gondola in their midst. Orange petals and the glistening gondola. With gentle sureness, tendrils lowered him into the flower, into the gondola's hatch. They followed him, spreading around the interior of the gondola. He knew that he was there with Waela and Thomas, yet still saw the flower as its petals closed. An orange blaze surrounded him, and he saw through the plaz the Hylighters all around, holding the gondola in a basket of tendrils. Again the wild play of his senses resumed, but now it was slower, and he could think between the beats of it. Yes, there were Thomas and Waela, eyes glazed, terrified or unconscious. Help them, Avata.
Even the seemingly immortal gods survive only as long as they are required by mortal men.
The Oak's Covenant. Oakes began to sputter and snore. His body lay half melted into cushions of the long divan which stretched beneath Legata's mural on the porch of the redoubt. The light was dull red, the early dayside of Rega coming in through the plaz above the sea. Legata untangled herself from Oakes, slowly eased the sleeve of her single suit from under his naked thigh. She stepped over to the plaz and looked out at the dayside light flickering off the tops of waves. The sea was wild turmoil, and the horizon a thick line of milky white. She found the uncontrolled violence of the sea repellent. Perhaps I was not made for a natural world. She pulled her single suit on, zipped it. Oakes continued to snore and snort. I could have crushed him there in those cushions, thrown his body to the demons. Who would suspect? No one except Lewis. The thought had very nearly become reality back there on the divan. Oakes had been satiric all through the dark hours. Once she had slipped her arms up around his ribs while he worked at her, sweating and mumbling, but she could not bring herself to kill. Not even Oakes. Waves whipped high onto the beach across the bay as she scanned the scene. The water slashed high this morning. The pounding surf echoed a deeper trembling of the earth, and she could hear the clatter of rock against rock. The sound must be frighteningly loud outside for it to be heard that well in here. It's the job of waves and rocks to make sand, she thought. Why can't I do my job that well, without question? The answer came immediately, as though she had thought it through countless times. Because changing rock into sand is not killing. It is change, not extermination. Her artist's eye wanted to find order in the view out the Plaz, but all was disorder. Beautiful disorder, but frightening. What a contrast with the peaceful bustle of a shipside agrarium. She could see the shuttle station off on the isolated point of land to her left, an arc of the bay between, and the low line of the protected passage leading from redoubt to station. That had been Lewis's idea. Keep the station remote, easy to cut off should attackers come from Colony. She found herself wanting the roll and toss of kelp leaves in the bay, but the kelp was going. A chill crawled up her spine and down her arms. A few die-irons, Oakes had said. She closed her eyes, and the picture that haunted her was her own mural, the accusing finger which pointed straight at her heart. You are killing me, it said. No matter how hard she shook her head, the voice would not be still. Against her better judgment, she crossed to the dispenser and keyed it for a drink. Her hand was steady. She returned to the Plaz-guarded view and sipped slowly while watching the waves bite their way. Oh, excuse me. She returned to the Plaz-guarded view and sipped slowly while watching the waves bite their way up the beach across the bay. The waves had buried the previous high tide mark at least a dozen meters back. She wondered whether she should wake Oakes. A Hylighter suddenly valved itself low across the beach below the shuttle station. A sentry appeared at the beachside guard post and snapped her heavy lasgun to her shoulder. Lasgun, whatever. Then hesitated. Legata held her breath, expecting the bright orange flash and concussion. But the woman did not fire. She lowered her weapon and watched as the delicate Hylighter drifted out of sight around the point. Legata let out her breath in a long sigh. What happens when we have no others to kill? Oak's desire for a paradise planet vanished when she confronted that seascape. He could make it sound so plausible, so natural, but what about the scream room? It was a symptom. Would people turn on each other, band together in tribes, and attack each other in the absence of dashers or runners, or kelp? Another Hylighter drifted past, farther out. It thinks. And the vanishing kelp. Oakes was right that she had seen the report. Oakes was right that she had seen the reports from the disastrous undersea research project. It thinks. There was a sentiency here which touched her where cell walls left off, somewhere within that realm of creative imagination which Oakes distrusted and would never enter. Almost 80% of this planet is wrapped in seas, and we don't even know what's under there. She found herself envying the researchers who had risked, and lost, their lives groping beneath these seas. What had they found? A pair of huge boulders down on the beach beneath her smashed together with a jarring crack that caused her to jump. She glanced at the beach across the bay. As quickly as it crossed the high tide mark, the waters began their ebb. Curious. Tons of boulders had been rolled up against the cliff barrier across the compound. More of them obviously must be on the beach beneath her. The boulders she could see were gigantic. That much power in the waves.
Legata.
The abruptness of Oak's voice and the touch upon her shoulder startled her, and she crushed the glass in her hands. In her hand, singular. She stared down at the hand, the cuts, her own blood, shards of glass glinting in her flesh.
Sit over here, my dear.
He was the doctor, then, and she felt thankful for it. He plucked out broken glass, then unrolled strips of cell tape from a dispenser at his comm console to stop the bleeding. His hands were firm and gentle as he worked. He patted her shoulder when he had finished.
There, you should.
The buzz of the console interrupted.
Colony's gone.
It was Lewis.
What do you mean, gone?
Oakes raged.
How can the entire.
A shuttle overflight shows nothing but a hole where Lab 1 was. Plenty of demons, hatchways to all lower levels blown.
He shrugged, a tiny gesture in the console screen.
That's thousands of people. All dead?
Legata could not face Lewis, even on the screen. She crossed to the divan silently and stared out the plaz.
There could be survivors holed up behind some of the hatches, Lewis went on. That's how we made it here when...
I know how you made it here, Oakes shouted. What are you suggesting?
I'm not suggesting anything.
Oakes gritted his teeth and pounded the console.
You don't think we should have Murdoch try to save anyone?
Why risk the shuttles? Why risk one of our last good people?
Of course. A hole, you say?
Nothing but rubble. Looks to have been the work of laser guns and plasteel cutters.
Do they... are there any shuttles left over there?
We disabled everything before leaving.
Yes, of course,
Oakes murmured. Then,
LTAs?
Nothing.
Didn't you and Murdoch say that you cleared everything out of that Lab 1 site? Moved it all here?
Apparently, the rioters thought there might be some burst hidden away there. They captured the only remaining communications equipment. They were demanding help from the ship.
They didn't.
Oakes could not complete the question.
The ship didn't answer. We were listening.
A deep sigh shook Oakes. Without turning to face him or the view screen, Legata called out, "How many people did we lose there?"
Ship knows!
Lewis threw back his head, laughing. Oakes hit the key to shut him off. Legata clenched her fists. How could he laugh that way at... She shook her head.
Nervous, Oakes said. Hysteria.
He was not hysterical. He was enjoying it.
Calm yourself, Legata. You should get some rest. We have much to do, and I'll need your help. We've saved the Redoubt. We have most of the food that was at Colony and far fewer people to eat it. Be thankful that you're among the living.
That worry in his tone, in his eyes. It was almost possible to believe he felt genuine love for her.
Legata.
He put out a hand to touch her arm. She pulled away. Colony's gone. The Hylighters and kelp are next. Then what? Me? She knew it was her own voice speaking, but she had no control over it.
Really, Legata, if you can't handle alcohol, you should not drink it.
His gaze went to the broken glass on the floor.
Especially this early in the dayside.
What an asshole. She whirled away from him and heard him press the console key and summon a clone worker to clean up the broken glass. As he spoke, Legata felt the last of her hope shatter in the morning air, lost on the wild glinting of the waves she could see out there. What can I do against him? Hey, thanks for tuning in, Mo Pakalolo. I think I'm reading that correctly. Yes, sure. Human, do you know how interesting it is, this thing you describe? Avata does not have a god. How is it that you have a god? Avata has self, has this universe, but you have a god. Where did you find this god? Kerro Panille. Translations from the Avata. For Thomas and Waela, the return of the Hylighters had appeared another concerted attack. Thomas tried to close the gondola's hatch and found it jammed. Waela was shouting up at him to hurry and asking if he saw Kerro. Both suns were up now, and the light on the sea was dazzling. Waela's head was still spinning from the gondola's gyrations. "What'll they do with him?" she called. "Ship knows." He jerked at the hatch cover, but it would not move. Something had hit the mechanism while the gondola was twisted and tilted in the first attacks. Thomas peered at the tacking Hylighters. One of them had its tendrils tucked up tightly. It could be holding Panille in there. He saw that the gondola had been pushed out of the dead kelp into a patch of living green. The sea all around was subdued by a carpet of gently pulsing leaves. "They're coming back!" Waela shouted. Thomas abandoned his attempts on the hatch, slid back into the gondola. "Brace yourself in your seat," he called, and he followed his own order while he watched the advancing swarm of orange. "What are they doing?" Waela asked. It was a rhetorical question. They could both see the Hylighters slow their advance at the last instant. In concert, they turned their great sail membranes into the wind and cupped the gondola in dangling tendrils. Waela freed herself from her seat, but before she could move, the massed Hylighters opened away overhead, and Panille was lowered through the hatch. She tried to avoid the questing mass of tendrils which accompanied Panille, but they found her. They enfolded her face with a sensation of tingling dryness which immediately gave way to a drunken sense of abandon. She knew her body. She knew where she was, right here in the gondola which was being held steady in a cupped hammock of Hylighter tendrils. But nothing mattered except a feeling of joy which insinuated itself all through her. She felt that the sensation came from Panille and not from the Hylighters. Avata? What are Avata? That thought had seemed her own, but she could not be certain. She was not aware of up or down. There was no spatial solidity. I'm going crazy. All of the horror stories about poisonous and hallucinogenic Hylighters crashed through her barriers, and she tried to scream but could not locate her voice. Still, the joy persisted. Panille was right there, saying things to soothe her. It's all right, Leanie. Where did he get that name for me? That was my childhood name. I hate that name. Don't hate any part of yourself, Leanie. The joy would not be denied. She began to laugh, but could not hear her own laughter. Quite suddenly, an island of clarity opened around her, and she knew Kerro Panille lay nude beside her. She felt his warm flesh against her. Where did my clothing go? It was not important. I'm hallucinating. This was a product of Thomas's command that she seduce the poet. She gave herself up to the dream, to the warmth and hardness of him as he slid into her, rocking her. And she sensed all around the questing tendrils as they explored, joining her with images of flaring stars. That, too, was unimportant. More hallucination. There was only the joy, the ecstasy. For Panille, the slowed play of the sense attack wavered when he first saw Waela. He felt his own body, and he felt the Hylighters. Wind whipped his sail membranes. Then he heard music, a slow and sensual chant which moved his flesh in time to the dance of tendrils around him. He found himself drawn to Waela, his hands upon her neck. How electric her flesh! His hands unsnapped her single suit. She made no effort, she made no move to assist or resist, but kept time to the sensory beat with a soft swaying of her hips, which did not stop even when the single suit slid off her body. Strangest sensation of all, he could see her flesh, the lovely body, yet he also saw a golden orange Hylighter rise from the sea and spring free into the sky, and he saw Hallie stretched out in warm yellow light beneath a cedar of a tree dome. Wonder filled him as he dropped his own suit and drew Waela down to the deck. Ship? Ship, is this the woman for whom I saved myself? How is it that you call upon Ship when you could call your human self? Was that Ship or Avata? No matter. He could not listen for an answer. There was only the hard beat of sexual magnetism, which told him every movement his body should make. Waela became not Waela, not Hallie, not Avata, but part of his own flesh, entwined with a sensation of enormous involvement by countless others. Somewhere in this he felt that he lost even himself. Thomas, still restrained securely by his seat straps when Panille returned, was caught there by entwining tendrils. He tried to fight them off, but voices. There were voices. He thought he heard old Morgan Hempstead back at Moonbase christening their void ship. Momentous day. There was a buzzing in his nostrils, and he smelled the musk of Pandora, but he was crouched within his own nostrils, recording this. Tendrils! They moved all over his body, under his suit, avoiding no intimate contact. As they moved, they sucked out his identity. First he was Raja Flattery, then Thomas, then he did not know who he was. This amused him, and he thought he laughed. I'm hallucinating. As I've mentioned before, the shifts to character perspectives often occur very quickly. So I'm like kind of dancing a little to keep ahead, but it's usually pretty clear. That was not even his own thought, because he was not there to have such a thought. There was a head somewhere spinning out of control. He thought he felt brains rattle and slosh in their cage of skull. He knew he ought to breathe, but he could not find where to breathe. He was sliding through a passage which no clone had ever known. The womb of all wombs. That's how it is to be born. Panic threatened to overcome him. I was never born. The Hylighters are killing me. Avata does not kill you. That was a voice echoing in a metal barrel. Avata? He knew that from his chaplain studies, ancient superego of the Hindu oversoul. Who am I who knows this? He glimpsed Panille and Waela, their naked bodies entwined in love-making, the ultimate biological principle. Clones don't have that link with their past. Am I a clone? Who am I? He knew what clones were, whoever he was. He knew that. Clones were property. Morgan Hempstead said so. Again, panic threatened him, but it was stifled instantly while he tried to follow a silvery thread of awareness which moved faster and faster as he sped to overtake it. Waela, Panille. He knew those had to be people, but he did not know who, except that the names filled him with rage. Something fought him to calmness. The mandala on his cubby wall. Yes, he stared at it. Who was Waela? A sense of loss flooded through him. He was forever out of his time, far gone from some place where he had grown, stripped of past and without his own future. Damn you, Ship! He knew who Ship was, the keeper of his soul, but this thought made him feel that he was Ship, and he had damned himself. No reality remained. Everything was confusion, everything gone to chaos. It's you damned Avata Hylighters! Keep that Panille out of my mind! Yes, I said my mind! Darkness. He was aware of darkness and of motion, sensations of controlled movement, glimpses of light and a glaring sun, then craggy rocks. He could see Rega low on a castellated rock horizon. There was flesh around him, and he knew it for his own.
I'm Raja Flattery, chaplain psychiatrist on... No, I'm Raja Thomas, ship's devil. He looked down to find himself strapped into his command couch. There was no motion to the gondola. When he looked out through the plaza, he could see solid ground, a damp stretch of Pandoran soil studded with native plants, odd spiky things with fluting silver leaves. He turned his head, and there was Waela seated on the deck, completely naked. She was staring at two single suits. One of them, Thomas saw, carried Waela's shoulder badge of the LTA service, and the other was Panille's. Thomas looked all around the gondola. Panille was not there. Waela turned to look up at Thomas. I think it was real. I think we really did make love. And I was in his head while he was in me. Thomas pushed himself hard against the back of his seat, his memory struggling for bits and pieces of what had happened to them. Where was the damned poet? He could not survive out there. Waela moved her tongue against her teeth. She felt that she had lost track of time. She had been out of her body in some new place, but now she knew her body better than ever before. Images. She recalled the earlier, more terrible moments off the south coast of the Egg, when she had sprawled on a kelp leaf, fighting for her sanity. This recent experience in the gondola was not the same, but one partook of the other. In both, she felt the aftermath as a loosening of her identity and a mixing of linear memories, shaking bits of her past out of place. Thomas unfastened his seat restraints, stood and peered out through the filtering plaza. He felt that something had reached into his psyche and drained away the energy. What are we doing here? How did we get here? There was no sign of Hylighters. What are Avata? The gondola had been deposited in a broad pocket of flat land surrounded by a rock rim. The place looked vaguely familiar. The outline of the west rim. He stared at it, caught up in a fugue state of attempted recollection. Where are we? That was Waela. His throat was too dry to respond. It took a moment of convulsive attempts to swallow before he could speak. I think we're somewhere near Oak's Redoubt. Those rocks. He pointed. Where's Kerro? Not here. He can't be outside. The demons! She stood and stared all around over the obstructing panels of instruments, craning her neck to peer in every direction. That fool poet! She looked up at the hatch. It was still open. In that instant, an LTA drifted over the rim of rocks to the west. The glare of Rega setting ringed it in a golden halo. The LTA was valved down to a landing beside the gondola. The hiss of its loud vents stirred up the dust. The gondola was a conventional landside type, armored against demons and studded with weapons. The side hatch opened a crack, and a voice called from within, "You can make it if you run! No demons near!" Hastily, Waela stood and slipped into her suit. It was like putting on familiar flesh. She felt her sense of identity firming. I must not think about what has happened. I'm alive. We're rescued. But somewhere within her she thought she heard a voice crying names. Kerro! Jim! Kerro! Where are you? There was no answer, just Thomas insisting that she follow only after he had tested the outside. Damn fool! I'm faster than he is. But she went quietly up the ladder behind him, watched him slide down the smooth plaza curve of the gondola, then followed on his heels. The rescue hatch of the other gondola swung wide as they reached it, and they were jerked inside by two pairs of hands. They were in familiar red shadows with the shipmen at defensive stations all around the interior. Waela heard the hatch slammed and dogged behind her, felt the gondola lift, swinging. There was the humming of a scanner as it passed over her body. A voice at her ear said, "They're clean." Only then did she realize that she stood in a sealed-off bubble within the rescue gondola. This spoke of only one threat. Nerve runners. There were runners in the area. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the shipmen who had scanned them, risking contact with runners. Turning, she saw a long-armed monstrosity, only vaguely shipman in shape.
"We take you lab one side,"
he said, and his mouth was a toothless black hole.
In a fit of enthusiastic madness, I created a rational creature, and it was bound towards him to assure, as far as was in my power, his happiness and well-being. This was my duty, but there was another still paramount to that. My duties towards the beings of my own species had greater claims to my attention, because they included a greater proportion of happiness or misery.
Dr. Frankenstein speaks. Ship records. Thomas stretched himself in the hammock of a cell and watched a fly creep its way across his ceiling. There were no ports in this cell, no chrono. He had no way of estimating the time. The fly skirted the protrusion of a sensor eye. "So we brought you, too." Thomas spoke aloud to the fly. "It wouldn't surprise me to find a few rats skulking around this place. Non-human rats, that is." The fly stopped and rubbed its wings. Thomas listened. There was a steady stream of footsteps up and down the passage outside his locked hatch. It had been locked from the outside. No handle in here. No handle in here. He knew he was somewhere within Oak's infamous redoubt, the fortress outpost on Black Dragon. They had taken all of his clothing, every possession, leaving him with a poorly fitted green single suit.
"Quarantine," he snorted, still talking aloud. "At Moonbase we called it the Hole."
Some of those footsteps outside were running. Everything was rush here. He wondered what was happening. What was going on over at Colony? Where had they taken Waela? They had told him he was headed for debriefing. It turned out to be a quick once-over by a strange medtech and isolation in this cell.
Quarantine.
Before they had closed the hatch, he had glimpsed a sign across the way. Lab 1. So, they had a Lab 1 here, too. Or they had moved the other one from Colony. He was aware of the sensor eye prying at him from the ceiling. The cell was Spartan. A hammock, a fixed desk, a sink, an old-style composting toilet without seat. Once more he looked at the fly. It had progressed to the far corner of the cell. "Ishmael," he said. "I think I'll call you Ishmael." "His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Oh, his hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren. Ship's unmistakable presence filled Thomas's head so suddenly that he clapped his hands over his ears in reflex. "Ship!" He closed his eyes and found that he was near tears.
"I can't give in to hysteria. I can't."
"Why not, Devil? Hysteria has its moments, particularly among humans."
"There isn't time for hysteria."
He opened his eyes, brought his hands away from his ears, and spoke in the general direction of the ceiling sensor.
"We have to solve your problem of warship. They won't listen to me. I'll have to take direct action."
Ship was relentless. "Not my problem, your problem."
"My problem, then. I'm going to share it with the others."
"It is time to talk of endings, Raj." He glanced at the sensor, as though that were the origin of the presence in his head.
"You mean break the recording?"
"Yes, it is the time of times." Was that sadness in Ship?
"Must you?"
Yes. So, Ship really meant it. This was not just another diversion, another replay. Thomas closed his eyes, feeling his voice go slack in his throat, his mouth dry. He opened his eyes, and the fly was gone. How long do we... How long? There was a noticeable pause. 7 dirons. That's not enough. I might do it in 60. Give me 60 dirons. What's such a sliver of time to you? Just that, Raj. A sliver. Annoying, the way it works its way into the most sensitive area. 7 dirons, Raj. Then I must be about other business. How can we discover the right way to warship in 7 dirons? We haven't satisfied you for centuries, and... The kelp is dying. It has 7 dirons until extinction. Oakes thinks it will be longer, but he is mistaken. 7 dirons, then, for you all. What will you do? Leave you to the certainty that you will wipe yourselves out. Thomas leaped from his hammock, shouted, I can't do anything about it in here. What do you expect from...
You in there! Thomas!
Oh, sorry. You in there! Thomas! It was a male voice from a hidden vocoder. Thomas thought he recognized the voice of Jesus Lewis. Is that you, Lewis? Yes. Who are you talking to? Thomas looked up at the sensor in the ceiling. I have to talk to Oakes. Why? Ship is going to destroy us. Let you destroy yourselves. The correction was gentle but firm in his awareness. Was that what you were shouting about? You think you were talking to the ship? There was derision in Lewis's tone. I was talking to Ship. Our warship is all wrong. Ship demands that we learn how to... Ship demands? The ship is about to be put in its proper place. A functional... Where's Waela? He shouted it in desperation. He had to have help. Waela might understand. Waela's pregnant. Waela's pregnant and she's been sent shipside to the Natali. We don't have birthing facilities here yet. Lewis, please listen to me. Please believe. Ship awakened me from Hive to put you all on notice. You don't have much time left to... We have all the time in the world. In this world. That's it. And this world has only 7 more dirons. Ship demands that we learn the proper warship before... Warship? We can't waste time on such nonsense. We have to make a whole planet safe to live on. Lewis, I have to talk to Oakes. You think I'm going to bother the CP with your babblings? You forget that I'm a CP. You're insane and you're a clone. Unless you listen to me, you're headed for destruction. Ship will break the... It will be the end of humankind forever. I have my orders about you, Thomas, and I'm going to obey them. There's only room for one CP here. The hatch behind Thomas popped open, and he whirled to see the yellow dayside lights of the passage framing an E-clone sentry there. Giant head, round black hole for a mouth, huge arms that hung nearly to his ankles. The eyes were glaring red and bulbous.
You!
A growling voice issued from the round black hole.
Out here!
One of the massive hands reached in, closed around Thomas's neck, and jerked him out into the passage. Warship! We have to learn how to warship! Thomas croaked.
I get tired of hearing that warship crap,
The sentry said.
You're moving out.
The sentry released his neck and gave Thomas a violent push down the passage. Where are we going? I have to talk to Oakes. The sentry lifted one of his arms, pointed down the passage.
Out!
But I... Another push sent Thomas stumbling. There was no resisting the strength of this clone. Thomas allowed himself to be herded down the passage. It curved to the right and ended at a locked hatch. The sentry took one of Thomas's arms in a relentless grip, opened the hatch. It swung wide to reveal the open ground of Pandora in the harsh cross-lighting of Alki swinging low on the horizon to his left. A sudden push from the clone sent Thomas sprawling into the open and took his breath away. He heard the hatch slam closed. Somewhere above him, he heard the distant fluting of a flock of Hylighters. "They've sent me into the open to die." And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Christian Book of the Dead, Ship Records. From the instant the first tentacles brushed her face to the moment she boarded the shuttle for ship, Waela lived in a blur of past, present, future which she could not control. Kerro was gone, and Thomas was not available. This much she knew. And contact with the Hylighters had left her with a voice in her mind. It flared there in flashes of total demand. She wavered between accepting the voice and believing herself insane. The voice of honesty would not answer, but this new voice intruded without warning. When it came, she felt herself filled with the same conceptual ecstasy she had felt in the gondola. It is the Avata way of learning. The voice kept repeating this. When she questioned, answers came, but in a jargon which confused her. Like electricity, human Waela, knowledge flows between poles. It activates and charges all that it touches. It changes that which moves it and moves within it. You are such a pole. She knew what the words meant, but they went together in a confusing way. And all the while she remained vaguely aware of the processing procedure when the rescue gondola deposited them at Colony. Thomas was taken away somewhere, and she was rushed into a medical unit for debriefing. The session was run by Lewis. Astonishing. It was right there that the first demanding flash hit her. Waela, I have found the Avata. She knew there was no sound, but the voice filled her sense of hearing. It was Kerro Panille, no denying it. Not his voice, but his identity recognized in an internal way which could not be disguised. She knew it as she knew herself. But she didn't even know that Kerro was alive. I'm alive. Then he had found some way of reaching out, or of reaching in. Either that or I'm insane, she thought. She did not feel insane as she stood in the medical section's glaring tile-white cubicle, looking across a metal table at Lewis. Hands supported her. It was nightside, she knew this. Riga had been setting, and they had brought her directly in here. Lewis was speaking to her, and she kept shaking her head, unable to answer him because of that voice in her mind. An older med-tech said something to Lewis. She heard 3 words.
Too soon for.
Then the whirl of that intruding voice returned. She was uncertain whether she recognized words, or whether it really could be called a voice, but she knew what was being said. It was a non-language, and she knew this when she found that she could not distinguish between I and we in Kerro's communication. A language barrier was down. In that instant of recognition, she knew Avata as Kerro Panille knew Avata. She wondered how she learned this lesson, this ancient bit of human history. How did I learn, Kerro Panille? What is done to one is felt by all, human Waela. Why am I human Waela? She asked it aloud and saw an odd expression come over the face of Lewis as he turned from talking to the medtech. This did not bother her. She felt her mind drifting lazily in Pandoran wind. There were mutterings and head-shakings among people around her. Medtechs, several of them. An entire team. She filtered them out. Nothing was more important than the voice in her mind. You are human, Waela, because you are at once human and at once Waela. There may be such a time as this is not so. Then you will be human. When will that be? The cold node of a pry box drilled to the back of her left hand, tingled up her arm, and sent her down a whirlwind of dis-timed memories which were not her own. When you know all that other humans know, and other humans know all of you, then you are human. She concentrated on that magnificent universe of the interior which this concept opened before her. Avata! She had no sensation of time while she floated in the arms of Avata, or whether Avata was really with her. If it was just a dream, she wanted it never to end. Only you can end it, human Waela. See? Memories poured into her, from that first sensory awareness of the first Avata to the coming of shipmen to Pandora, and then to her rescue from the gondola. Everything poured into her through a timeless flash, a non-linear stream of sensations. This is not a hallucination. She saw humans, shipmen humans of many suns, uncounted histories which died with them. It baffled her how she understood this. How? She heard the voice in her mind. This we trade with those we touch, lives of all humans alive in each of you. But you and human Kerro are the first to recognize the trade. Others resist and fear. Fear erases. Human Thomas resists, but out of human fear, not out of human Thomas fear. There is something he will not trade. More on that later. Remember that. This will be important. You don't know when, but it will. Waela found herself eavesdropping through another's eyes. She was looking in a mirror, and the face that looked back was Raja Thomas. A shaking hand explored the face, a wan face, tired. She heard a voice which she knew to be Ship's. Raj! Then there were no more mind pictures. He blanked her out. Rejected. She found herself alone on a gurney in a redoubt passage. So Thomas is on speaking terms with Ship. Why? The question was a dry cackle in her throat, and a nearby medtech bent over her. You'll be shipside soon, dear. Don't worry. The gurney's straps hurt her breasts. This is Pandora, human Waela. All evil has been released here. There was that voice again. Not Kerro. Avata? The word tingled on her tongue as medtechs began to roll her gurney onto a shuttle. There was another face above her then. Dream or reality? Small, a face like Lewis, but not Lewis. The voices all around were babble. She was being wheeled, pushed, and probed, but her attention remained with the voice in her mind and the link she had seen to that intricate chain of humanity. She's pregnant. That means shipside. The Natali. Orders. How long's she been pregnant? Looks like more'n a month. That can't be, she thought. I've just arrived here, and Kerro and I... She felt a doubled awareness of time then. One told her she had arrived at the redoubt late in the same diurn that had seen their sub enter the lagoon. The other time sense lived in her abdomen, and the clock there had gone mad, spinning, spinning, spinning. It raced completely out of pace with the clock in her head. She'll be the Natali's problem pretty soon, someone said. Those were words in her ears. Time out of sync was more important. From the time Kerro had slipped into her. The time was out of phase. She knew only that she must be delivered shipside to the Natali. That was the way of worship. How can that be, Avata? She felt that she was meant to be pregnant, and the act of conception was an Avata formality. As the hatchway opened to the shuttle, the lean-faced man took hold of the gurney, and she saw that it was one of Murdoch's people, a long-fingered clone who spoke in a falsetto. A shock of fear jolted her body. "Am I going shipside?" She couldn't bring herself to ask the other half of the question. "Or to Lab 1?" "Yes," he said, as she thumped across the threshold of the shuttle. "What do we do now?" she asked aloud, and the voice from her mind said, "Save the world." Then the hatchdogs were secured, and she slept. Conscious. From Latin com, with scire, to know, which is probably an ancestor word for scry, but I wouldn't know for sure. Uh, I can't remember for sure. I should actually know that. Conscience. From Latin com, intensive, with scire. Conscious, to know. Conscience, to know well, or, in the vernacular, to know better. Ship records.
Shipside?
Oakes screamed into the vocoder on his console.
Who ordered the Taolini woman shipside?
The medtech facing him on the screen looked terrified and small. His little mouth worked itself into a stumble of words.
You did, sir. I mean, orders. She's pregnant, sir, and you signed the warship order sending all...
Don't tell me what I signed!
No, sir. Are you ordering her back, sir?
Oakes pressed a hand against his forehead. Too late now. The Natali have her. Reprocessing her groundside would mean an executive order, and that would mean attention. The redoubt was problem enough. Better to let the matter rest until something could be arranged.
Damn, why couldn't we have moved the Natali down here? I want to talk to Murdoch.
He is shipside, sir.
I know he's shipside. Get him on a line to me as soon as you can.
He smacked the key on the console with the side of his fist, and the frightened little medtech's face faded.
Damn, just when things were going right.
He looked out over the clear bay beside the shuttle station. No more kelp there, anyway. The perimeter lights and the arcs from the nightside crew's torches reflected the flat calm of the water.
No kelp. It'll be gone from Pandora before we know it.
That left ship.
The ship.
And now that Taolini woman. No telling what she knows. Thomas could have convinced her of anything. After all, he was a CP. Oakes turned back to his console and activated the holo of Thomas's debriefing. Thomas sat in the center of the room, a cell 3 meters square. He faced the sensor. A tall woman from behavioral stood facing Thomas, and he was shaking his head from side to side.
No time. No time. You must decide how you will warship. Ship says... Ship. You must decide how you will warship, ship says, and the clue is in the sea. I know it's in the sea. Warship. Warship. And there is no time after all the eons and all these worlds. No time. No time.
Oakes switched off the holo in disgust.
The kelp got to him, that's for sure. Maybe it's just as well.
He paced back to the plaz which screened the ocean view and watched the dazzle of the welders and cutters play across the water.
The kelp is a trade, he thought. Thomas wasn't all that far off. With the kelp gone, we buy ourselves time, and with time, we buy a world. Not a bad barter.
He retraced his steps again and again, plaz to console, console to plaz. Having that Taolini woman shipside was too big a variable. It's probably Dowlini. Was too big a variable. Something would have to be done.
Damn that tech!
His fist came down again.
He should have double-talked her into Lab 1 instead of letting her go shipside. Can't the fool think for himself? Do I have to make every decision?
He knew Murdoch was up there in a power scrimmage with Ferry, but they were Lewis's people and it was Lewis's business. This whole fiasco was really Lewis's fault.
Until they interfere with the CP,
he said aloud, pointing an affirmative finger at his reflection in the Plaz. On the other side of the reflection, the quiet bay began to pick up the rhythmic rush, rush of small waves licking at the beach. Inflection is the adjective of language. It carries the subtleties of delight and horror, the essence of culture and social process. Such is the light pattern displayed by the kelp. Such is the song of the Hylighter. Kerro Panille, History of the Avata, from the Preface. Waela sat watching a holo of Panille as a child. Except for the projected action at the holofocus, it was quiet in the small teaching study where Hylighters had put her. The chair, a simple sling in a metal frame, presented the holo controls on its arm beneath her right hand. Soft blue light suffused the room, downtoned to increase resolution at the holofocus. Each time the holo sound subsided, a low susurration of venting air could be heard. At frequent intervals, Waela turned her head slightly to the left and drank from a tube leading to a ship tit. Her left hand rested lightly on her abdomen, and she was certain that the hand felt the growth of the fetus. There was no concealing the rapidity of that growth, but she tried not to think about it. Every time she was forced to confront the mystery of what was happening within her, she felt a hiccup of terror, a sensation which subsided in a blink as something dampened it. A sense of isolation permeated the study, an accent on her awareness that she was being kept out of contact with ordinary shipside life. The Natali were doing this deliberately. The pangs of terrible hunger controlled the movement of her mouth to the ship tit. She drank greedily and with feelings of guilt. Hylighters had not explained why there was a ship tit here, nor why ship fed her from it when others were denied. Feelings of rebellion welled up in Waela from time to time, but these, too, were dampened by some automatic response. She continued to sit and stare at the holo of the young Panille. At the moment, the holo showed him sleeping in his cubby. The register gave his age as only 12 standard annos at the time, and there was no mention of who had authorized this holo. A ship coder rattled in the sleeping child's cubby then, waking Panille. He sat up, stretched, and yawned, then increased the cubby's light level with one hand while rubbing his eyes with the other. Ship's voice filled the cubby with its awful clarity. "Last night you claimed kinship with God. Why do you sleep? Gods need not sleep." Panille shrugged and stared at the coder from which Ship's voice issued. "Ship, have you ever stretched out as long as you can and reach... Sorry. Ship, have you ever stretched out as long as you can reach and yawned?" Waela held her breath at the audacity of the child. The question suggested blasphemy, and there was no reply. Panille waited. Waela thought him patient for one so young. "Well?" he asked, finally, smug in his adolescent logic. "I'm sorry, young Kerro. I nodded my head, but apparently you did not see it." "How could you nod? You don't have a head to put on a pillow." Waela gasped. The child was challenging Ship because of Ship's question about kinship with God. She waited for Ship's response and marveled at it. "Perhaps the head I nod and the muscles I stretch are simply not within your field of vision." Panille took a glass of water from his cubby spigot and drank before replying.
You're just imagining what it's like to stretch. That's not the same at all.
I actually stretched. Perhaps it is you who imagines what it is to stretch.
I really stretch because I have a body, and that body sometimes wants to sleep.
Waela thought he sounded defensive, but there were plain hints at amusement in Ship's tones. Never underestimate the power of imagination, Kerro. Notice the word itself, creator of images. Is that not the essence of your human experience?
But images are just images.
And the artistry in your images, what is that? If some day you compose an account of all your experiences, will that be artistry? Tell me how you know that you exist.
Waela slapped the shut-off switch. The hollow image of young Panille held itself in the negative, like an afterthought, then died. But she thought he had been nodding as she stopped the replay, as though he had acquired sudden insight. What did he acquire in his odd way of relating to Ship? She felt herself inadequate to the task of understanding Panille, despite these mysterious recordings. How had Hallie Eckel known about these hollows? Waela glanced around the tiny study cubby. What a strange little place hidden away here behind a secret hatch. Why did Hallie want me to look at these recordings? Will I really find him there in his past, lay the ghost of his childhood to rest, or drive his voice from his mind? Damn it! Lay the ghost of his childhood to rest, or drive his voice from my mind? Waela pressed her palms against her temples. That voice! In her most unguarded moments of panic, that voice came into her mind, telling her to be calm, to accept, telling her eerie things about someone called Avata. I'm going mad. I know I am. She dropped her hands and pressed them against her abdomen, as though this pressure would stop the terrible speed of that growth within her. Hallie Eckel's diffident knock sounded at the hatch. It opened just enough to let her slip through. She sealed the hatch, swung her pry box around to her hip. What have you learned? Hallie asked. Waela indicated the jumble of hollow recordings around her chair. Who made these? Ship. Hallie put her pry box on the arm of Waela's chair. They don't tell me what I want to know. Ship's not a fortune teller. Oh, sorry. Ship's not a fortune teller. Waela wondered at the oddity of that response. There were times when Hallie seemed at the point of saying something important about Ship, something private and secret, but the disclosure never came, just these odd statements. Hallie attached the cold platinum node of the pry box to the back of Waela's left hand. There was a moment of painful itching at the contact, but it subsided quickly. Why is the baby growing so fast in me? Waela asked. The hiccup of terror leered in her mind, vanished. We don't know, Hallie said. There's something wrong, I know it. The words came out flat. There's something wrong, I know it. The words came out flat, absolutely devoid of emotion. Hallie studied the instruments of her pry box, looked at Waela's eyes, her skin. We can't explain this, but I can assure you that everything except the speed of it is normal. Your body has done months of work in only a few hours. Why? Is the baby... Everything we scan shows the baby is normal. But it can't be normal to... Ship says you're being fed everything you need. Hallie indicated the tube into the ship tit. Ship says... Waela looked down at the linkage between her hand and the pry box. Hallie keyed a cardiac scan. Heart normal, blood pressure normal, blood chemistry normal, everything normal. It is not! It is not! Waela panted with the exertion required to put emotion into her voice. Something did not want her excited, upset, or frustrated.
This child is growing at a rate of about 23 hours for every hour of the gestation, Hallie said. That is the only abnormal thing about this. Why? We don't know. Tears welled up in Waela's eyes, slipped down her cheeks. I trust Ship, Hallie said. I don't know what to trust. Without conscious volition, Waela turned to the ship tit, drank in long, sucking gulps. The tears stopped while she drank. She watched Hallie at the same time, how purposefully the young woman moved, changing the settings on the pry box. What a strange creature, this Hallie Eckel. Ship-cut hair as black as Panille's, that odd ring in her nostril. So mature for one so young. That was the real oddity about Hallie Eckel. She said she had never been groundside. Life was not rendered down to raw survival here the way it was groundside. There was time here for softer things, more sophisticated dalliances. Ship's records at your fingertips. But Hallie Eckel had groundside eyes. Waela stopped drinking, her hunger satisfied. She turned and stared directly at Hallie. Could I tell her about Kerro's voice in my head? You scattered the graphs there, Hallie said. What were you thinking? Jesus, I keep getting them confused. I don't understand why. Sorry. Going between certain voices is a lot harder. Oh my gosh, the section where Lewis and Raja Thomas were interacting was brutal. I was just like, oh wait, no. It's, I guess, the way I categorize or compartmentalize where the voices are kept.
I keep the voices in special boxes, you see.
You scattered the graphs there, Hallie said. What were you thinking? Waela felt a warm flush spread up her neck. You were thinking about Kerro, Hallie said. Waela nodded. She still felt a tightening of her throat when she tried to talk about him. Why do you say the Hylighters took him? Hallie asked. Groundside said he's dead. The Hylighters rescued us, Waela said. Why should they turn around and kill him? Waela closed her eyes as Hallie remained silent and watchful. You see, Hallie, I hear Kerro's voice in my head. No, Hallie, I'm not insane. I really hear him. What does it mean to run the P? Hallie asked. Waela's eyes snapped open. What? Record says you once lost a lover because he ran the P. His name was Jim. What does it mean to run the P? Slowly at first, then in bursts, Waela described the game. Then, seeing the reason for Hallie's question, added, That has nothing to do why I believe Kerro's alive. Why would the Hylighters take him away? They didn't tell me. I want him to be alive too. Oh, Jesus. I want him to be alive too, Waela, but... Hallie shook her head, and Waela thought she detected tears in the medtech's eyes. You were fond of him too, Hallie? We had our moments. She glanced at Waela's swelling abdomen. Not those moments, but good just the same. Not those moments, but good just the same. With a quick shake of her head, Hallie turned her attention to the pry box, keyed another scan, converted it to code, stored it. Why are you storing that record? She's watching me carefully, Hallie thought. Do I dare lie to her? Something had to be done, though, to allay the obvious fears aroused by this examination and the questions which could not be answered. I'll show you, Hallie said. She called back the record and shunted it to the study screen beyond the holofocus. With an internal pointer, she indicated a red line oscillating across a green matrix. Your heart, note the long, low rhythm. Hallie keyed another sequence. A yellow line wove its way through the red, pulsing faster and with lower intensity. The baby's heart. Again, Hallie's fingers moved over the keys. Here's what happened when you thought about Kerro. The two lines formed identical undulations. They merged and pulsed as one for a dozen beats. then separated. What does that mean? Waela asked. Hallie removed the node from Waela's hand, began restoring the pry box to its case at her hip. It's called synchronous biology, and we don't know exactly what it means. Ship's records associate it with certain psychic phenomena, faith healing, for example. Faith healing? Without the intervention of accepted scientific medicine? Medicine? But I've never... Kerro showed me the records once. The healer achieves a steady physiological state, sometimes in a trance. Kerro called it a symphony of the mind. I don't see how that... The patient's body assumes an identical state, in complete harmony with the healer's. When it ends, the patient is healed. I don't believe it. It's in the records. Are you trying to tell me my baby is healing me? Given the unknowns about this rapid gestation, Hallie said, I would expect greater upset from you, but you don't seem capable of maintaining long periods of physiological imbalance. Whatever else she may be, she's still an unformed infant, Waela said. She could not do that. She? Waela felt pressure against one of her lower ribs, the baby shifting. I've known all along that it's female. That's what the chromosome scan says, Hallie agreed, but the odds were even that you could guess right. Your guess doesn't impress me. No more than your faith healing. Waela stood up slowly and felt the baby adjust to this new position. Unborn infants have been known to compensate for deficiencies in the mother, Hallie said, but I'm not selling faith healing. But you said, I say a lot of things. She patted her pry box case. We've set up a special exercise cubby down in PT. You have to keep your body tone, even if... If you're right, this baby will be born in a matter of dirons. What can I do to... Just get down to PT, Waela. Hallie slipped back out through the hatch before Waela could raise more objections. That was an alert and intelligent woman in there. Waela knew how to search records, and her curiosity would not be dampened by inadequate answers. Now what do we do? Hallie turned at the creche hatch and saw one of the children staring out at her from the open bubble of the play area. Hallie knew the child, Raoul Andrit, age 5. She had treated him for nightmares. She bent toward him. Hi, remember me? Raoul turned his face up to her, wan and listless. Before he could answer, he fell out of the bubble into the passage. Setting her alarm signal on call, Hallie turned the child onto his back and attached the pry box. The emergency readout buzzed, and, for the first time, Hallie doubted a computer diagnosis. In the snarl of facts blurring past her eyes, she read, Fatigue. Exhaustion. 10.2. Yes? The voice of a responding medic was thin in her pry box speaker. She briefed him, and they set the boy up for a glucose and vitamin series from her emergency packet. I'll send a cart. The speaker blipped as the medic broke the connection. Hallie put a question to her computer. Raoul Andrit, age? The screen flashed 5.5. What is the age of the subject just tested? 10.2. Her fingers scurried across the keys. The last subject tested was Raoul Andrit. How could he be 5.5 and 10.2? He has lived 5.5 standard annos. His body exhibits the characteristic intracellular structures of one who is 10.2. For medical purposes, cellular age is the more important. Hallie sat back on her heels and stared down at the unconscious child. Dark circles under his eyes, pale skin. His chest appeared too thin, and it heaved convulsively when he breathed. What the computer had just told her was that this little boy had doubled his age in a matter of dirons. She heard the cart pull up, a young attendant with it. Get this child to sickbay, notify his Natali sponsor, and continue treatment for fatigue, she said. I'll be along shortly. She hurried toward physical therapy and, at the passage turn, bumped into a breathless medic rushing out.
Echo, I was just coming for you. You signaled with a child who fainted? There's another one in the secondary play area. This way.
She followed on his heels, listening to the description.
He's a 7 anno in poli-sci section. Kid can barely stay awake. Eating too much lately, and with food monitoring, that's a problem. But he was weighed today and found to be down 2 kilos from last week.
That's a very fast weight drop. She did not have to be told that this was a significant drop for a child of that age. The boy was lying on a stretch of thick green lawn in the free play area, a shutter-shielded dome overhead. As she crouched beside him to set up her case, she smelled the fresh-clipped grass and thought how incongruous that was, the enticing green odor and this boy ill. The pry-box readout did not surprise her after Raoul Andrit.
Fatigue, exhaustion, signs of aging.
Should we move him?
That was a new voice. She turned and looked up at a thin-faced man in groundside blue standing beside the medic.
Oh, this is Cy Murdoch, the medic said. He came up to ask some questions of the Taolini woman. You sent her down to PT, didn't you?
Hallie stood up, recalling the grapevine stories about Murdoch. Kelp and clones. Lab 1 director. One of Lewis's people.
Why would you want to move him? She asked.
I understand from the medics that Raoul Andrit has been taken to sickbay with a similar seizure. It occurred to me that...
You say Raoul Andrit with a certain familiarity, she said. You're wearing groundside. What do you know about...
Now, see here. I don't have to answer your...
You'll answer me or a medical board. This could be a disease brought up from groundside. What's your association with Raoul Andrit?
His face went blank, completely unreadable. Then,
I know his father.
That's all?
That's all. I've never seen the child before. I just knew he was here, shipside.
Hallie, trained from childhood to be a medtech, to support life and see that shipmen survived, knew each bodily muscle, nerve, gland, and blood vessel by name, and often spoke to them quietly as she worked. Instinctively, she knew that Murdoch was trained otherwise. He repelled her. And he was lying.
What's your business with Waela Taolini?
That concerns the CP, not you.
Waela Taolini has been put in my charge by the Natali. That's ship's business. Anything concerning her concerns me.
It's just routine, Murdoch said.
Every mannerism said it was not just routine, but before she could respond, she saw Waela walk into the play area. While she was still at some distance, Waela called,
They said somebody here was looking for me. Do you? Stay back there, Hallie called. We've got some sick boys and we don't want them near any expectant mothers. Wait for me over in the Natali section. I'll join you in...
Forget it.
That was Murdoch speaking with a new forcefulness. He gave every indication of someone who had come to an important decision.
We'll meet with Ferry in medical. Immediately.
Hallie protested.
With Ferry? He doesn't...
Oakes left him in charge shipside. That should be good enough for you.
He turned on his heel and strode from the area. Myths are not fiction,
but histories seen with a poet's eyes and recounted in a poet's terms.
Oh, sorry. I emphasized the wrong syllables on all of that.
Let's try that again. Myths are not fiction, but histories seen with a poet's eyes and recounted in a poet's terms.
Ship quotes. Ferry sat at his command couch sipping a pale liquid which reeked of mint.
He's got a mint julep, does he?
He had been reviewing biostats on a shielded view screen when Hallie and Waela entered, and he did not lower the shields. The command cubby, which had been tacked onto the processing complex after Oak's departure, was brightly illuminated by corner remotes which filled the room with yellow light. There was a sharp smell of caustic cleaner in the air. Hallie noted two things immediately. Ferry was not yet overcome by the drink, and he appeared fearful. Then she saw that the command center had been tidied recently. Anywhere Ferry worked was soon a scattered mess, a notorious situation shipside where instincts of neatness equated with survival. But things had been made neat here. Unusual. She saw Murdoch then and realized that Ferry feared what Murdoch might report to Oakes. Murdoch stood at one side of the command center, arms folded, impassive. Ferry closed down his screen with a conscious flourish, swiveled to face the newcomers.
Thank you for coming along so quickly. So quickly.
Ferry's voice was reedy with controlled emotions. He stroked the bridge of his nose once, an unconscious imitation of Oak's. Waela noted that his fingers were trembling. What does he fear? What does he fear? She wondered. The man's furtiveness spoke of terrified concealments. Is it something to do with my baby? The characteristic blip of her own fears lifted and fell. And there was Kerro's voice. Trust Hallie and Ship, Waela. Trust them. Waela tried to swallow in a dry throat. Could no one else hear him? She shot a furtive glance around the room. When she heard the voice, she felt sure of it. The instant it was gone, she doubted. Her real-time perceptions were demanding full attention, though. Physical senses honed to high sensitivity by the necessities of survival on Pandora, these she trusted. And Ferry demanded her attention. The man was a menace, operating on several levels of deception. She had heard stories about Ferry, a competent enough medical man with a few eccentricities, but not to be trusted alone with a young woman. Her eyes told her something else. A bumbler, Waela told herself, who sits in the command seat. Interesting. Why did Oakes choose a bumbler? Waela's Pandora-sensitized nostrils detected alcohol in Jerry's drink. Jerry? Must be Ferry. I don't think it's Jerry Ferry. That would be too... No, what's his name? There've been a couple misprints. Most of them I've caught and corrected. That one I didn't. No. That's Bickle. Winslow Ferry. Yeah, it's supposed to be Ferry. Sorry, my bad.
To all wondering.
What is this, banned books? No, that's not banned books. It's older than that. I don't think Ban was around then. Berkeley Books. The Berkeley Books edition. From April of 1980 has a bunch of textual errors. It seems mostly in single words. They're rare, but they're around. Couple letters transposed. Easy to miss. They're forgivable misses. The one in Armor where like half a page twice was like repeated for no reason. Or confusingly, those should not have been missed. I don't know what went on with those. Where were we? Oh, right. A bumbler, Waela told herself, who sits in the command seat. Interesting. Why did Oakes choose a bumbler? Why does a president choose a nearly convicted or investigated felon to hold a position in their cabinet? Excellent question. People under investigation for interesting crimes. Could it be loyalty? Could it be fear? One wondereth. Purely hypothetical question, however. Of course. Waela's Pandora-sensitized nostrils detected alcohol in Ferry's drink. She put on her best impassive mask to conceal the recognition. The groundside uses of alcohol and tetrahydrocannabinol in their various forms. How did I get that right? I'm so goddamn good. Sorry. I came to conscious awareness well after that. I'm so sorry. tetrahydrocannabinol! Yeah! Sorry. Fragoth exultant! It's a multisyllabic word that he got right first try. My goodness. Oh, frabjous day. The groundside uses of alcohol and tetrahydrocannabinol, damn it. The groundside uses of alcohol and tetrahydrocannabinol in their various forms were generally accepted in Colony, but somehow she had not expected this shipside. With ship to protect them, well, shipmen had long held that alcohol was a risky and undesirable poison shipside. But then again, she knew that Ferry, like herself, had spent his early years earthside. His reversion might not be all that unusual. Still, Ferry's actions interested her. If the fact of her impregnation outside ship's regular breeding program were taken seriously in certain circles, well, why else would Ferry be using view-screen shields? And alcohol. She did not want her life, nor her baby's life, depending on someone who deliberately lowered his acuities. Drinking, she thought. The word was dredged up out of her childhood, and she had a bottomless pit feeling about the high-plus waking time which had passed since she had equated that word with alcohol. The shielded screen bothered her. It was time someone invaded Ferry's privacy, she thought. That drink smells like fresh mint. Could I taste it?
Yes, of course.
It was not of course, but he offered her the glass.
Just a taste. It's not the kind of thing a prospective mother should have.
The glass was cold against her fingers. She sipped the drink and closed her eyes, recalling a scorched afternoon in Earthside summer when her mother had let her have a diluted mint julep with the grown-ups. The color of this drink was paler, but it was definitely bourbon with mint. She opened her eyes and saw Ferry's gaze fixed on the glass. Hungry for it, she saw. He's nearly drooling. It's quite good, she said. Where'd you get it? He reached for the glass, but Waela handed it to Hallie, who hesitated and looked at Ferry, then at Waela. Go ahead, Waela said. Everyone should have one sometime. I had my first when I was 12. When Hallie still hesitated, Ferry said,
Perhaps she shouldn't, what with this strange illness going around. What if it's catching?
He treats it like a precious jewel, Waela thought. It must be hard to get. She said, If it's that contagious, we've caught it. If it's that contagious, we've caught it. Go ahead, Hallie. The younger woman sipped, swallowed, and immediately bent her head in a fit of coughing, the glass thrust out for someone to take it. Ferry grabbed it from her hand. Eyes watering, Hallie said, That's terrible.
It's all in knowing what to expect,
Ferry said. And lots of practice, Waela said. You never told us where you got it. Not one of our lab alcohols, is it? Ferry placed the glass carefully on the deck beside his seat.
It's from Pandora.
Must be hard to get.
Don't we have more important things to discuss? Murdoch asked.
They were his first words, and they transfixed Ferry. He reached down for the drink, drew his hand back without it. He turned and fussed with the controls for his screen, dropped the shield, hesitated, then left it down. Waela promised herself that she would use the first opportunity to call up the records Ferry found so interesting. With unrestricted use of ship's research facilities, it would not be difficult. Murdoch moved around behind Ferry, an action which increased Ferry's nervousness. Waela found herself sympathizing with the old man. Murdoch in that position would make anyone's shoulder blades twitch. Ferry sputtered then. There's a comma there. A comma, then a colon. Sorry. Ferry sputtered, then,
I was waiting for some others to come up before taking up the business I mean...
are we doing here?" Hallie asked. She did not like the undercurrents flowing through this room. Unspoken threats lay heavy on Ferry's shoulders, and it was obvious they came from Murdoch. Ferry reached for the drink with a convulsive motion, but before he could put it to his lips, Murdoch reached over Ferry's shoulder and removed the glass from his hand. "This'll wait." Murdoch put the glass on a ledge behind him. As he turned back toward the others, the hatch opened and 3 people entered. Hallie recognized Brulagi from medical, a heavy-set woman with fat arms and a thick lower lip. She wore her auburn hair in the regular close-cropped style, and her eyes shone bright blue above a flat nose. Right behind her came Andrit from behavioral, a large dark man with quick almond eyes of deep brown, and a nervous, darting manner. Behind these 2 was Usija, gray-haired, a thin-lipped, soft-spoken woman from the Natali, who had assigned Hallie to monitor Waela Taulini.
Ah, here you are, Ferry said. Please be seated, everyone. Please be seated.
Hallie was glad to sit. She found a sling chair for Waela and another for herself. Waela moved her own chair to seat herself directly across from Ferry. It put her apart from the others, an observer's distance, and it let her focus on Ferry and Murdoch without having to turn. Ferry would notice, and it would annoy him, she thought. He wanted attention, not investigation. He wanted attention, not investigation. "What is it with you, old man?" Waela wondered. "What do you fear?" The 3 latecomers perched on a couch at right angles to Ferry. Murdoch remained standing. Hallie, noting Waela's move, wondered about it, but was distracted by the sudden realization that Andrit from behavioral must be the father of young Raoul. What was going on here? Murdoch touched Ferry's shoulder, and the older man jumped. "Show them the map." Ferry swallowed, turned to his keyboard, punched at it clumsily. A miniature projection of ship's schematic materialized at the holofocus beside him. Hallie recognized the special Natali area outship from behavioral and noted a number of red dots through the projection. Brulagi from medical leaned forward with her thick arms on her legs and stared at the 3-dimensional map. Andrit appeared agitated by it. Usija merely nodded. Could be Usiha, I'm not sure. "What are the red markers?" Hallie asked.
Each dot represents a stricken child, Ferry said. If you connect them, they form a spiral, and you'll note that they increase in density as they reach the spiral center.
"A vortex," Murdoch said. Waela peered closely at the schematic. She caught her breath and glanced up to catch a look of unguarded fury on Andrit's face. He was clenching and unclenching his fists. She saw the heavy muscles of his forearms knotting under his singlesuit. Ferry pulled some papers from the ledge beside his keyboard and shuffled through them while he spoke.
For the sake of those who might not know, where is your cubby, Waela?
Andrit leaned forward, almost falling from the couch as he glared at Waela. She saw Murdoch repress a smile. What amused him? "You all know where I sleep, Doctor. My cubby's at the center of the spiral." Andrit lunged as quickly as anyone Waela had ever seen shipside. But even though she felt heavily pregnant, Pandora had conditioned her reflexes to blurring speed. When Andrit hit the space where Waela had been sitting, she no longer was there. Before he could recover, Waela felled him with a blow to his carotid, every move automatic. She felt strength flowing through her. It gushed from the fetus within her and out through every fiber of her body. Hallie, out of her chair by this time, looked from Andrit sprawled unconscious on the deck to Waela, who stood poised and breathing easily in front of them. The sudden exertion had fanned the reddish glow under her skin to a blaze. As she turned slowly on one heel to see if there would be more attack, she was an awesome sight. Dazed, Hallie asked, "Why did he do that?"
Waela confronted Ferry. Why? She stood balanced on the balls of her feet. Andrit had threatened not her, but her unborn child. Let any of them try to harm her child. Murdoch chose to answer, an odd glint in his eyes. He appeared to be enjoying this. He was personally upset, you understand. One of the stricken children is his son.
What do those red dots really mean? Hallie demanded.
Oh, there have been some energy problems, we believe, Murdoch said. We saw a similar thing in Lab 1. Waela took a step toward Ferry. I want to hear it from you. Oak's left you in charge here. What's going on?
I don't really know much about it.
Ferry licked his lips, shot a glance over his shoulder at Murdoch. You mean you're not supposed to know anything about it? Waela said. Tell us what you do know. Now, let's change our tone a bit, Murdoch said. There is an injured man on the deck, and this whole unfortunate matter does not require more passion. He turned toward the Natali representative. Dr. Usiha, since the medtech appears unable to respond. Hallie looked down at Andrit, who was beginning to stir. He'll recover, Waela said. I pulled my blow. Hallie stared at her. The implication was obvious. She could have killed the man. Belatedly, Hallie bent to examine him. Her pry box showed a bruise on his neck, some nerve damage, but Waela was right. He would recover. What happened in Lab 1? Waela directed her question to Murdoch. An artificial form of this phenomenon. You are the first natural example of this that we've seen. Natural example of what? Waela forced the words out. The draining of energy from other people. Waela glared at him. What was he saying? She took a step toward him and felt Hallie's hand on her arm. Waela whirled on the medtech and almost brought her down. Sensing this, Hallie jerked her hand back.
Waela, just a moment. I'm beginning to understand.
Understand what?
They think you're responsible for the sick children.
Me? How? She turned back toward Ferry. Explain. Murdoch started to speak, but she snapped an angry glance at him. Not you! Him!
Now, Waela, calm yourself, Ferry said. This has all been an unfortunate mistake.
What do you mean, unfortunate mistake, you drunk? You set this up. You invited Andrit here. You knew about that spiral in your schematic. What were you trying to do?
I will not take that tone from you, Ferry said. This is
your funeral if you don't tell me what's going on here. Sorry. Let me pitch that up a little higher. This is your funeral if you don't tell me what's going on here. Hallie stared at Waela. What was happening? What was happening to the woman? Murdoch, Hallie noted, was standing very still, no threatening movements at all. Usiha and Brulagi were frozen in their seats.
Now, don't you threaten me, Waela,
Ferry said. There was a plaintive note in his voice. She's perfectly capable of killing him if he doesn't satisfy her demand. Hallie thought, Ship save us! What has come over her? Sorry, what has come over her? There we go. They're leaking. They're melding. Usiha began to speak very softly, but her voice was compelling in the tense air of the room.
Dr. Ferry, you are looking at the phenomenon of the threatened feral mother. It goes very deep. It is dangerous to you. Since Waela is Pandora conditioned, I advise you to answer her.
Ferry pushed himself back in his seat as far as he could go. He wet his lips with his tongue.
Your circumstances shipside, Waela. There has been some, let us call it, superstition.
About what?
About you. We have tested you since your return, and we do not find usable answers. Even Ship is no help. Whatever it is, Ship has locked it away, restricted, or. He shot a venomous look at Hallie. We are referred to MedTech Hallie Eckel.
Hallie could not repress a gasp. Waela whirled and glared at her. Hallie realized suddenly that now she was a target.
Waela, I swear to you that I don't know what he's talking about. I'm here to protect you and your baby, not to hurt you.
Waela gave a curt nod, returned her attention to Ferry. Andrit groaned and pushed himself upright. Waela bent and, with one hand, hoisted him to his feet. In the same motion, she hurled him toward the couch where he narrowly missed Brulagi and Usiha. The effortless way Waela did this made Hallie hold her breath, then exhale slowly.
Very dangerous indeed.
Tell us the circumstances where Ship refers you to Hallie Eckel.
Sorry. Tell us the circumstances where Ship refers you to Hallie Eckel,
Waela said. Her voice was like a bubbling volcano. Andrit leaned forward abruptly and vomited, but no one looked.
When we asked if it was the child causing this, or if it was you,
Ferry said. Hallie gasped, her vision suddenly blurred by memory of a dusty hillside, the setting of a blazing yellow sun, and 3 figures tortured on crosses. What kind of a child was Waela carrying? Waela spoke without turning. Hallie, does that mean anything to you?
How was your child conceived?
Hallie asked. Waela turned a startled look toward her. Kerro and I, for Ship's sake, you know how babies are made. Do you think we carry axolotl tanks on those subs? Hallie looked at the deck. The legend said Immaculate Conception, no man involved. A god. But it was only a legend, a myth. Why would Ship refer the questioners to her? Many times since that trip through time, Hallie had asked herself, why? What was I supposed to learn? Ship spoke of holy violence. The accounts concerning the Hill of Skulls, which she had scanned since the experience, certainly confirmed this.
Holy violence and Waela's child?
Waela continued to stare at her. Well, Hallie?
Perhaps your child is not perhaps your child is not confined to this time, she shrugged. I can't explain, but that's what occurs to me.
Apparently this satisfied Waela. She glanced at Andrit, who was holding his head and remaining quiet. She turned back to Ferry. What is it about my baby? What are you afraid of?
Murdoch?
It was a desperate plea from Ferry. Murdoch crossed his arms and said, We got the reports from Ferry, and... What reports? Murdoch swallowed, nodded at the hollow projection with its spiral of red dots.
What were you supposed to do to me?
Waela asked. Nothing. I swear it. Nothing. I'm assuming that's Murdoch responding.
He's terrified, Hallie thought. Has he seen this feral threatened mother phenomenon before?
Questions? Waela asked. Oh, yes, of course. Questions. Ask them. Well, I discussed this with Natali, that is, Oaks, wanted me to ask you if you would return groundside to have your baby. Violate our rules of worship? Waela looked at Usiha.
You do not have to go groundside, Usiha said. We merely agreed that he could ask.
Waela returned her attention to Murdoch. Why groundside? What did you hope to do there? We have stockpiled a large supply of burst, Murdoch said. It's my belief you will need every ounce of it you can get. Why? Your baby is growing at an accelerated rate. The physical requirements for the cellular growth are very large. But what about the sick children? She turned toward Andrit. What have they told you? He lifted his head. What have they told you? He lifted his head, glared at her. that you're responsible. That they've seen these before groundside. Do you want me to go groundside? They could see him battling with his warship conditioning. He swallowed hard, then, I just want it to go away, whatever's making my son sick. How do they explain my responsibility for this? They say it's a psychic drain, often observed but never explained. Perhaps ship. He was incapable of repeating outright blasphemy. They chose a poor tool to attack me, Waela thought. The pattern of the plot was clear now. Andrit was to demonstrate potential violence in shipside opposition to her. She would be forced to go groundside. For your own good, my dear. They wanted her down there badly. Why? How am I dangerous to them? Harry, have you ever heard of this phenomenon? No, but I would agree that the evidence points at you or your baby. You don't need burst, though. Why? Murdoch demanded. Ship is feeding her from the ship tits. Murdoch glared at her. Then, how long have you Natali known that this baby was growing too rapidly?
How do you know it?
Usiha countered. It's part of this phenomenon, rapid growth, abnormal demand for energy. We've known since our first examinations of her, Hallie said. You kept it under wraps and proceeded with caution, Murdoch said. Precisely what we did groundside. Why would you want to feed me on burst? Waela asked. If the fetus gets enough energy from burst, the psychic drain does not take place. You're lying, Waela said. What? You're as transparent as a piece of plaz, Waela said. Burst cannot be better than elixir. Usiha cleared her throat.
Tell us, Murdoch, about your experience with this phenomenon.
We were doing some DNA work with kelp samples. We found this survival characteristic. The organism absorbs energy from the nearest available... Oh, geez, Louise, that's Hallie. We were doing some... That can't be Hallie. Okay, that's definitely Murdoch. And then... Okay, so there's a misprint. Don't worry about it. I'm just confused. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. 1 sec, I lost my page. Come on, where are you? I think it was there. I think it was there. Eck! Does that, I'm not aging. Transparent as a piece of plastic. There we go, we are in the right spot. We were doing some DNA work with kelp samples. We found this survival characteristic. The organism absorbs energy from the nearest available source, Murdoch said.
The mother's the nearest available source,
Hallie said. The mother's the host and immune. The organism takes from other organisms around it which are similar to the hungry one.
I'm not aging, Hallie said, and I'm around her more than anyone.
It does that, Murdoch said. It takes from some people and not from others.
Why from children? Hallie asked.
Because they're defenseless.
That was Andrit, fearful but still angry. Waela felt energy charging every muscle in her body. I'm not going groundside. Andrit started to get to his feet, but Usiha restrained him.
What are you going to do?
Usiha asked. I'll move out to the rim beyond one of the agraria. We'll keep people, especially children, away from me while Hallie studies this condition. She looked at Hallie, who nodded. Murdoch did not want to accept this. It would be far better if you came groundside, where we've had experience with... Would you try to force me? No, oh no.
Perhaps if you sent us a supply of burst, Usiha said.
We would not be able to justify shipment of such a precious food at this time, Murdoch said.
Tell us what you know about the phenomenon,
Holly said. Can we develop an immunity? Does it recur or is it chronic? Does... This is the first time we've seen it outside a lab. We know that Wheeler Dowlini had conceived outside the breeding program and outside Colony's protective barriers, but...
Why don't I get answers from Colony? Ferry asked.
He had been sliding his chair slowly to one side while Murdoch spoke, and now he looked up at the man. That has nothing to do with...
You speak of not shipping burst at this time, Ferry said. What is special about this time?
Waela heard desperation in the old man's voice. What is Ferry doing? Something deep in him was driving these questions out. Your questions do not relate to this problem, Murdoch said, and were... Your questions do not relate to this problem, Murdoch said, and Waela heard death in his voice. Ferry heard it too, because he fell into abashed silence.
What do you mean about the conception being outside of Colony's barriers?
Usiha asked. It was the scientist's voice gnawing at an interesting question. Murdoch appeared thankful for the interruption. They were floating in a kind of plas bubble. It was in the sea, completely surrounded by the kelp. We don't know all of the details, but some of our people have suggested that Waela and her child may no longer be human type. Don't try to get me groundside, Waela said. Usiha climbed to her feet.
Humans bred freely Earthside and anywhere they liked. We are merely seeing it happen again, plus an unknown which must be studied.
Murdoch directed his glare at you. His glare at her. You said...
I said you could ask her. She has made her decision. Her plan is a sensible one. Isolate her from children, put her under constant monitoring.
Usiha's voice droned on, outlining specifics to implement Waela's decision. A place with a ship tit, a rotation of Natali medtechs. Natally? I don't know. Waela tuned out the droning voice. The babe was turning again. Waela felt dizzy. None of this is normal. Nothing is as it should be. Blip. The fear lifted in her awareness, then dropped. What did Murdoch mean that she might no longer be human type? Human type. Waela tried to recall details of what had happened in the gondola as it floated on Pandora's sea. All she could remember was the ecstatic wash of her union with something awesome. This shipside command cubby, Usiha's voice, none of this was important any longer. Only the baby growing at its terrible pace within her was important. I need a ship tit. An image of Ferry pressed itself into her awareness. He was somewhere else with his inevitable drink in his hand. Murdoch was talking to him. Ferry was trying to protest without success. She heard faint voices, distant and muffled, as though they came from a sealed room. There was a high view of Pandora's sea glowing in the light of two suns. It was replaced by a blurred vision of Oakes and Legata Hamill. They were making love. Oakes lay on his back on a brown woven mat. She was astride him. Slow movement. Very slow. An insane look of joy on her face, her hands clenching and unclenching the fat of his chest. In the vision, Legata leaned back, trembling, and Oakes caught her as she fell. It's a dream, a strange wakened dream, Waela told herself. Now the dream shifted to Hallie on her knees in her own cubby. Atop a ledge in front of Hallie stood an odd construction of wood. Two smooth sticks, one of them fixed off-center across the other. Hallie leaned her head close to the crossed sticks, and, as she did this, Waela experienced the unmistakable fragrance of cedar, as fresh as anything she had ever smelled in a tree dome. Abruptly, she was back in the command cubby. Hallie's arm was around her shoulder, leading her out the hatch while Usiha and Brulagi argued with Murdoch behind them. You need food and rest, Hallie said. You've overstressed yourself. Shipped it, Waela whispered. Ship will feed me. The prophets of Israel who preached the idea of the nucleus of 10 good men required for a city's survival built this concept on the Talmudic idea of the 36 just ones, whose existence in each generation is necessary for the survival of humankind. Judaism's Book of the Dead, Ship Records. Until she saw him sprint across the east plain, a hooded dasher close behind, Legata did not know Thomas was at the redoubt. She stood at the giant screen in the command center, the hum of late dayside activity going on all around. Oakes and Lewis were conferring off to her left. The big screen had been set on a scan program, ready to lock onto any unusual activity. She took over the controls and zoomed in on the running man. The dasher was only a few leaps behind him. The scene was outlined in the harsh cross-light of the evening suns. "Morgan, look!" Oakes rushed to her side, stared up at the screen.
"The fool!"
he muttered. Thomas swerved abruptly to the left, made a desperate leap off a dangerously high rock onto the sand at the high tide mark. The dasher leaped after him, misjudged, and landed in a patch of dead kelp washed up by the surf. It immediately began gulping rags of kelp while Thomas ran off down the beach. Another dasher appeared behind him then, dropping from a high rock, running as it landed. Thomas dodged around a boulder and sped off along the high tide mark. His boots kicked up globs of damp sand. There was no doubt that he heard the dasher closing on him.
"He'll never make it. No one can."
Oakes's trembling voice betrayed his nervousness. "Afraid he won't get away?" Legata asked herself. "Or afraid he will?" "Why did you turn him out?" she asked. She kept her attention on the figure darting and weaving away from her, as she remembered that night-side meeting with him on Colony's Lab 1. She found herself silently urging him on. "Into the surf! Dodge into the water!"
"I didn't turn him out, my dear," Oakes said. "He must have escaped."
Oakes turned and called out to Lewis across the room.
"Make sure nothing's been left open to the outside."
"He was a prisoner. Why?"
"He and the Taolini woman came back from their undersea venture without Panille. A wild story about Hylighters rescuing them. That requires more than a simple debriefing."
Lewis came up to stand beside Oakes.
All secure.
Thomas had swerved toward the water once more, diving under ragged scraps of dead kelp. He surfaced, draped with the stuff, and the second dasher remained behind to feed on the scraps. Thomas was visibly tiring now, his stride irregular. "Can't we do anything for him?" Legata asked.
"What would you have us do?"
Oakes asked. "Send a rescue party."
"That area's full of dashers and flatwings. We can't afford to lose any more people."
If he was foolish enough to go outside, he takes his own chances, Lewis said. Isn't that the rule for running the P?
He stared at Legata. "He's not running the P," she said, and she wondered if Lewis had somehow learned about her own mad run.
"Whatever he's doing, he's on his own,"
Oakes said. "Oh, no!" The gasp escaped her as the black figure of another hooded dasher, 2 flatwings close behind it, took up the chase. Thomas was staggering now, and the dasher closed rapidly. In the last blink, as the dasher stretched for the final blurring leap, it swerved abruptly aside. A mass of tentacles dropped from the air, and a Hylighter soared across Thomas, scooping him up. Oakes worked the screen controls, zooming back for a general view. Someone behind them said, "Would you look at that?" It was almost a sigh. The hills and cliffs inland from the redoubt displayed tier upon tier of Hylighters, great mobs of them gathered in a siege arc beyond the range of the redoubt's weapons.
"Goodbye, Raja Thomas," Oakes said. "Too bad the Hylighters got him. A dasher would have ended it quickly."
"What do the Hylighters do to you?" Legata asked. Before Oakes could answer, Lewis turned to the room and said,
All right, everybody. Show's over. Back to work.
We only have evidence from some demon carcasses,
Oak said.
They were sucked dry.
I wish we could have saved him, she said.
He took his chances, and he lost.
Oakes reached out to the controls, his finger poised over the scan program. Stopped. He stepped backward to bring the whole screen into view. The highlighter carrying Thomas had lost itself in the distant mobs. The great billowing bags now danced on the air, underlighted by the orange glow of the suns, their sail membranes rippling and filling. Legata saw what had stopped Oakes. More highlighters were coming up, climbing higher and higher, filling in the sky.
Ship's eyes,
Another voice behind them said. They're blocking out the suns.
Split screen,
Oakes said.
Activate all perimeter sensors.
It took several blinks for Legata to realize he was addressing her. She flipped the switches and the screen went gray, then reformed in measured squares of the different views, a locator number under each. Highlighters englobed the sky all around the redoubt, over the sea, over the land.
Look there.
It was Lewis pointing to a screen showing the base of the inland cliffs.
Demons.
They became aware, then, that the entire rim of cliffs, as far as the sensors could reach, writhed with life. Legata felt certain that never before had such a mass of teeth and claws and stings assembled in one place on the face of Pandora.
What are they doing?
Oakes said, and his voice trembled. They look like they're waiting for something, Legata said.
Waiting for orders to attack,
Lewis said.
Check security.
Legata keyed for the proper sensors, and the screens flickered to reform with views of the cleanup work on the damage left by the E-clone revolt. Orders from whom? She wondered. Crews were busy in every screen, mostly E-clones guarded by armed normals. Some worked in the open courtyard where the nerve runners had left nothing alive. Others toiled along the shattered sections of the perimeter where temporary barriers had been erected. There were even some heavily guarded crews outside. No demons or highlighters interfered. Why aren't they attacking? Legata asked.
We seem to be at a standoff,
Lewis said.
We're saving our energy,
Oakes said.
My orders are not to shoot them at random. We cook them now only if they come within 25 meters of our people or equipment.
They can think, Lewis said. They think and plan.
But what are they planning? Legata asked. She noticed that Oakes was going paler by the blink. Oakes turned.
Jesus, we'd better do some planning of our own. Come with me.
They left, but Legata did not notice. She remained at the screen, working through the outside sensors. The whole landscape had turned into a golden dazzle of suns and highlighters, black cliffs aswarm with demons, and a surging sea capped with white foam and spray. Presently, Legata turned, realized that Oakes and Lewis were no longer in the command center. I'll have to act soon, she thought, and I have to be ready. She worked her way through the activity in the center, opened a main corridor hatch, and hurried toward her own quarters. Oh, geez, someone wants me. One sec. Sorry about that. Poet, you see bones up ahead where there are none. By the time we get there, so do they. Hallie Eckel, Private Letters.
Hallie studied the monitors on the reclining Waela with care. It was well into dayside, but Waela appeared to be asleep, her body quiet on the tightly stretched hammock which they had rigged in one of ship's rim compartments. Her abdomen was a mounded hillock. There was no hatch to this cubicle, only a fabric curtain, which rustled in faint stirrings from the agrarium to which this extrusion was attached. This is not normal sleep, Hallie thought. Waela's breathing was too shallow, the passivity of her body too profound. It was as though she had slipped back into something approaching Hybe. What did that mean for the fetus? The compartment was slightly larger than a regular cubby, and Hallie had brought in a small wheeled cart to support the monitor screen. The screen showed Waela's vital signs as visible undulating curves with synchronous time blips. A secondary set of lines reported on the child developing in Waela's womb. Womb. A simple twist of a dial could superimpose one set of lines on the other. Hallie had been checking the synchronous beat for almost an hour. Waela had come to this Natali retreat without protest, obeying every suggestion Hallie made with a sleepwalker's passivity. She had appeared to gain some energy after feeding at a corridor ship tit, a process which still filled Hallie with confusion. So few ever received elixir at the ship tits anymore that most shipmen ignored them, taking this as a sign of ship's deeper intents or displeasure. Attendance at warship had never been more punctual. Why was ship feeding Waela? While Waela drank from the ship tit container, Hallie had tried to get a response from the same corridor station. No elixir. Why ship? No answer. Ship had not been easily responsive since sending her to see the crucifixion of Yeshua. The lines on the monitor screen were merging once more, fetus and mother in synchronous beat. As the lines merged, Waela opened her eyes. There was no consciousness in the eyes, only an unmoving stare at the compartment ceiling. Fly us back to Jesus. As she spoke, the synchronous lines separated, and Waela closed her eyes to sink back into the geography of her mysterious sleep. Hallie stood in astonished contemplation of the unconscious woman. Waela had said Jesus the way Ship pronounced the name, not Yeshua or Jesus, but Jesus. Jesus. Had Ship sent Waela, too, on that odd journey to the Hill of Skulls? Hallie thought not. I would recognize the signs of that shared experience. Hallie knew the marks on herself which came from that trip to Golgotha. My eyes are older. And there was a new quietude in her manner, a wish to share this thing with someone. But she lived with the knowledge that no other person might understand, except possibly, just possibly, Kerro Panille. Hallie stared at the pregnant mound of Waela's abdomen. Why had he bred with this older woman? Fly us back to Jesus? Could that be just delirious muttering? Then why Jesus? A deep sense of uneasiness moved itself through Hallie. She used her pry box to call down to Ship Corps and arranged for a relief watch on the monitor. The relief showed up presently, a young Natali intern named Latina. Her official green pry box hung at her hip as she hurried into the compartment. What's the rush? Hallie asked. Ferry sent word that he wants to see you right away down at Warship 9. He could have called me. Hallie tapped at her own pry box. Yes, well, he just said for me to tell you to hurry. Hallie nodded and gathered her things. Her own pry box and recorder were beyond habit, a part of her physical self. She briefed Latina on the routine as she gathered her equipment, noting the log of synchronous beats, then ducked out through the curtain. The agrarium was a scene of intense dayside activity, a harvest in process. Hallie woved her way through the dance of workers and found a servo going core-side.
At Old Hull, she took the slide to Central and dropped off at the study passage, which led to Warship 9. The red numeral winked at her as she found the hatch and slipped into the controlled blue gloom. She could not see Ferry anywhere, but there were perhaps 30 children in the 5 to 7 age range sitting cross-legged around a holofocus at the center of the warship area. The focus showed a projection of a man in shipcloth white who was lying on bare ground and covering his eyes with both hands in great pain or fear. "What is the lesson, children?" What is the lesson, children? The question was asked in the flat and emotionless tone of ship's ordinary instruction programs. One of the boys pointed to another boy beside him and said,
He wants to know where the man's name came from.
The projected figure stood, appearing dazed, and a hand reached from outside the focus to steady him. The hand became another man in a long beige robe as the focus widened. Beside this other man, skittish and wild-eyed, danced a large white horse. The children gasped as the horse stepped into, then out, then back into the hollow. They clapped when the robed man got it under control. Hallie moved across to a warship couch overlooking this performance and sank into the cushions. She glanced around once more for Ferry. No sign of him. Typical. Tell her to hurry, then he was not here. Neither of the projected figures was speaking, but now a voice in a strange tongue boomed from the holofocus. How familiar that tongue sounded! Holly felt that she could almost understand it, as though she had learned it in a dream. She tapped the "Translate" switch on the arm of the couch beside her, and the voice boomed once more. "Saul! Saul! Why do you persecute me?" That voice. Where had she heard that voice? The white-clad figure, still with hands over his eyes and concealing most of his face, rolled over and climbed to his feet with his back to Hallie. She saw that he was not wearing a ship suit after all, but a white robe which had clung to his long legs. The man stumbled back 2 steps now and fell once more. As he fell, he cried, "Who are you?" The booming voice said, "I am Yeshua, whom you persecute. It is hard for you to kick against the thorns." Hallie sat in breathless quiet. Yeshua, Jesus, Jesus. The holofocus blipped out, and the warship lights came up to a warm yellow. Hallie saw that she was the only adult in the room. This had been a session for young children. Why had Ferry ordered her to meet him here? One of the children, still seated on the floor, spoke directly to Hallie.
Do you know where that man got his name?
"It was a mixture from 2 ancient cultures Earthside," she said. "Why were you watching that?"
Ship said that that was today's lesson. It started with the man on the horse. He rode very fast. Do we have horses in Hybe?
"The manifest says we have horses, but we have no place for them yet."
I'd like to ride a horse sometime.
"What did you learn from today's lesson?" Hallie asked.
Ship is everywhere, has been everywhere, and has done and seen everything, the boy said.
Other children nodded. "Was that why you showed me Yeshua, Ship?" No answer, but she had not expected one. "I didn't learn my lesson. Whatever it was Ship wanted me to learn, I failed." Distraught, she stood and glanced at the boy who had addressed her. Why weren't there any adults here? It was children's warship, but not even a guide? "Has Dr. Ferry been here?" she asked.
He was here, but someone called him away, a little girl in the background said. Is he supposed to leave warship?
"When it's the business of ship," Hallie said. "When it's the business of ship," Hallie said. The apology sounded empty, but the girl accepted it. Abruptly, Hallie turned away and slipped out of the room. As she left, she heard the little girl call,
But who's going to lead us in lesson study?
Not me, little girl. I still have my own studying to do. Something was going very wrong shipside. Waela's odd pregnancy was merely one symptom among many. Holly ran down the side passage coreside from the warship area, found a service access plate, and slipped it aside. She wormed her way down a dimly lighted tube to a cross tube where she slipped out through another service plate into the main passage to records. There was activity in records. A teener group learning how to handle the more sophisticated equipment, but she found her aisle between the storage racks unoccupied, and no one at the console which concealed Kerro's small study lab. Hallie opened the concealed hatch, saw a pale pink light in the lab. She slid inside and sat at the control seat. The hatch snicked closed behind her. She was breathless from the rush of getting here, but wanted no delay. Where to begin? Vocoder? Projection? Hallie chewed at her lip. Nothing could be hidden from Ship. The lesson for the children had been a true one. She knew this. I don't even need this equipment to address Ship. Then why did Ship use this place at all? Most of you find it less disturbing than when I speak in your mind. Ship's intimate voice issued from the vocoder in front of her. For some reason, the calm and rational tone angered her. We're just pets. What happens when we become a nuisance? How could you become a nuisance? The answer was there without considering it. By losing our respect for Ship. There was no reply. This cooled her anger. She sat in silent contemplation for a moment. Then, who are you, Ship? Who? Not quite the proper term, Hallie. I was alive in the minds of the first humans. It required time for the right events to occur, but only time. What do you respect, Ship? I respect the consciousness which brought me into your awareness. My respect is made manifest by my decision to interfere as little as possible in that consciousness. Is that how I'm supposed to respect you, Ship? Do you believe that you can interfere with my consciousness, Hallie? She let out a long breath. I do interfere, don't I? It was a statement, not a question. With a sudden sensation of sinking, as though the realization occurred because she let it happen and not because she willed it, Hallie saw the lesson of the Hill of Skulls. The consequences of too much interference, she whispered. You please me, Hallie. You please me as much as Kerro Panille ever pleased me.
Hallie!
It was Ferry's voice shouting at her over the prybox speaker at her hip.
Get to sick bay!
She was out the concealed hatch and halfway down the storage aisle before she realized she had broken away from Ship in mid-conversation. Ship had spoken personally with very few people, and she had the impudence to jump up and leave. Even as this thought flashed through her mind, she laughed at herself. She couldn't leave Ship. Ferry met her at the main hatchway into sickbay. He was wearing the heavier groundside blue and carried another suit of it under his arm. He thrust it at her, and Hallie saw then that the suits had been fitted for helmets of hazardous flight. She accepted the suit as Ferry thrust it at her. The old man appeared to be in the grip of deep agitation, his face flushed, hands trembling. The groundside fabric felt rough in her hands, so different from the ship cloth. The detachable slicker and hood were contrastingly slippery. What's happening? She asked.
We have to get Waela off ship. Murdoch's going to kill her.
She was a blink accepting the import of his words. Then doubts filled her. Why would this fearful old man oppose Murdoch? And by implication, oppose Oakes? Why would you help? She asked.
They're demoting me groundside, sending me to Lab 1.
Hallie had heard the rumors of Lab 1, clone experiments, some wild stories, but Ferry was visibly terrified. Did he know something definite about Lab 1?
We have to hurry, he said.
But how? They'll catch us.
Please, put on the ground sides and help me.
She slipped the clothing over her ship suit and noted how bulky it made her feel. Her fingers fumbled with the slicker's catches as Ferry hurried her into sickbay.
We'll all be gone by the time they suspect, he said. There's a freighter leaving in 4 minutes from Docking Bay 8. It's carrying hardware, no crew, everything on automatic.
They were at sickbay alcove by now, and, as he pulled aside the curtains, Hallie suppressed a startled question. Waela lay on a gurney, already clad in groundside slicker, with the hood pulled down over her brow. Her swollen abdomen was a blue mound under the slicker. How had Ferry brought her here?
Murdoch had her brought down here as soon as you were relieved,
Ferry said, grunting as he wrestled the gurney out of its alcove. Hallie moved to unhook the monitor connections.
Not yet, Ferry snapped. That's the signal to Bio that something's wrong.
Hallie drew back. Of course, she should have thought of that.
Now hook up your pry box, Ferry said. People will think we're moving her somewhere for more tests.
Ferry folded the groundside hood under Waela's head and covered her with a gray blanket. She stirred sleepily as he lifted her head. What did they give her? Hallie asked.
A sedative, I think.
Hallie looked down at her groundsides, then at Ferry. People would take just one look at our clothes and know something is wrong.
We'll just act as though we know what we're doing.
Waela jerked in her sleep, mumbled something, opened her eyes, and said, No, no. Just as quickly, she was back in her sedated sleep. I hear you, Hallie muttered.
Ready?
Ferry asked. He gripped the head of the gurney. Hallie nodded.
Unhook her.
Hallie removed the monitor connections, and they wheeled Waela out into the passageway, moving as fast as they could. Docking Bay 8, Hallie thought. 4 minutes. They could make it if they were not delayed too long anywhere along the way. She saw that Ferry was guiding the gurney toward the tangent passage to the docking bays. Good choice. They had taken fewer than a dozen hurried steps when Hallie was paged.
Echo to sickbay. Echo to sickbay.
Hallie estimated 200 meters from sickbay to their goal. They could not trust ship transport internally. If Murdoch was a killer, if she had figured him for less than what he revealed himself, then placing themselves in a transit tube would be disaster. He could override the controls and have them delivered like salad to his hatchway. The gurney's wheels squeaked, and Hallie found this irritating. Ferry was panting with unaccustomed exertion. The few people they passed merely observed the obvious rush on medical business and squeezed aside to let them pass. Once more she was paged.
Echo! Emergency in sickbay!
They skidded around the corner into the passage to the docking bay and nearly overturned the gurney. Ferry grabbed for it and prevented Waela from sliding off. Hallie helped to settle Waela as they continued pushing toward number 8. They were passing number 5, and she could see the 8 down the passage ahead of them. Ferry, reaching under Waela's shoulder as they moved, pulled out something which had caught his eye. Hallie saw him go pale. What's that? He held it up for her to see. The thing looked insidious, a small pale tube of silver.
Tracer!
Ferry gasped. Where was it?
Murdoch must have tried to feed it to her, but he didn't stick around long enough to be sure she swallowed it. She must have spit it out.
But
they know where we are. The biocomputer can track this through the body, yes, but it can also track it anywhere in ship.
Hallie grabbed it out of his hand and threw it behind her as far as she could. All we need's a little delay.
This is as far as you go, Echo.
It was Murdoch's shrill oh, I guess he's shrill.
This is as far as you go, Echo!
It was Murdoch's shrill voice, almost paralyzing her as he stepped out of the number 8 hatch just ahead of Ferry. She glimpsed a laser scalpel in his hand, realizing he could use it as a weapon. That thing under full power could sever a leg at 10 meters. Wait, you make scalpels that can sever legs at 10 meters? That's the end of the chapter? My goodness, y'all will have to stick around for next week, or tune in next week for the thrilling conclusion to the Jesus incident. How will they get out of this mess? Oh my gosh, King Kazong tuning in? Thanks, man. Long time no see. How you doing? Been a hot minute. Hope you're doing well. Enjoying the day after the food consumption. Anyway, so yeah, things are ramping up in a hurry. What you'll notice throughout the rest of the Pandora sequence rather, which includes the Jesus incident, the Lazarus effect, and the ascension factor, is you have some overlapping uh, themes and thematics, themes and characters. Sorry, thematics and characters. I'm losing my mind. When you get immersed like this into a book, it's sometimes, for me anyway, I sometimes find it hard to come back out and try to have an intelligent conversation one way or otherwise. Um, so you'll notice some overlap. You'll notice some repetition of concepts. You'll see evolution of those concepts. There's going to be some pretty big callbacks in book 3. I'm doing real well myself. Thank you for asking, Kazan. Um, you'll notice some repetition. You'll notice some evolution. You'll notice some callbacks. Um, the the final volume, the Ascension Factor, has probably the most callbacks of any of them, whereas the Lazarus Effect has the fewest. Um, Actually, I'd say the Jesus Incident and the Ascension Factor are about tied. You're going to have a bunch of references to Destination Void. You're going to have a number of references to this. You're going to have some evolution of some of the ideas broached in the Lazarus Effect. Suffice it to say, there are more books in this series, so this is not the end. Um, and we go some pretty interesting places. One of the things that I kind of like to bring up whenever I'm talking about Dune, the Dune series, specifically the later books by Frank Herbert. Um, like, my brain just completely dropped the ball. Heretics and Chapter House. There we go. Particularly Heretics, well, actually, God Emperor, Heretics, and Chapter House of Dune. You definitely feel a lot of overlap and similarities and some convergent conceptual evolutions going on. So one of the things you'll have, and I don't think this is a tremendous spoiler, one of the ideas that pops up in this, it's not a spoiler, you've already heard about this in this book. One of the things that pops up in the Jesus incident and in God Emperor of Dune is like long-term breeding programs that are ultimately making people faster, responding to stimuli more quickly, um, becoming smarter, and a few other things, all for a possibly for a more important goal. Um, and you have these at the beginning of every chapter, and it's kind of that's very much a Frank Herbert convention. Beginning of every chapter, you're going to have like some piece of a diary or some piece of information that relates to the overall setting and concepts that are being broached. Like you have the Frankenstein's monster stuff, which is adjacent to ship's creation itself, adjacent to husbanding new life. There's a bunch of themes going on here that are pretty wild and out there, told in what can be frequently a confusing manner, but all come together pretty handily. But one of the things I like bringing up about um, the later Dune novels, namely God Emperor, Heretics, and Chapter House, is how
it feels like by the time we hit the resolution that occurs in the ascension factor, it does kind of feel like Dune was sort of heading in an interesting parallel trajectory, and you'd get to an interesting place in that regard, um, as this series does, which I find fairly fascinating. Some of that's clearly intentional. Some of that's just what rad sci-fi authors do, is they iterate on the ideas that they're working with. Um, Frank Herbert's no exception, and he's got Bill Ransom as well working with him, and they came up with a pretty great series. Um, which unfortunately leads me to mention the Brian Herbert post Chapter House books. Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson post Chapter House Dune books, which, like, I think some of the basic framework that was there made sense, but unfortunately it's done in the most mediocre way possible. The most like, if Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom had been doing those, you'd have had a whole different can of worms. I refer specifically to the ones where they're out in I think it's a no ship traveling through space, and suddenly there's like reincarnated robots and shit that are reincarnated in human meat bodies, and they're like, ha ha ha, well, actually, we were the real villains all along. All according to plan, or something. And it's extreme. It's kind of painful. It's I don't know if anyone's read those, and I'm sorry if that's a spoiler if you were looking forward to reading those, but they're frankly not very good. So I feel safe in calling it out. They will never be read on stream. This stream, probably. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate more Dune universe, but like not like this. Not like this. And the thing that's frustrating, and it's something I wound up mentioning about a completely unrelated medium in the form of a show called Kamen Rider Hibiki, which is this Japanese live-action hero show where it winds up changing directors midway through. The end point that's reached, kind of, sort of, you feel could have gotten there anyway. It feels like that was the end point that was being that was part of the the end point we were going to get to, but the trajectory we took to get there, the path we took to get there, was wrong, if that makes any sense at all. At any rate, I do recommend the rest of this series, the Pandora sequence, as it is called. We are in for some very exciting times indeed. When we get around to the Lazarus effect, other than the pacing starting slow and then ramping way up towards the end to the point where you're like, wait a minute, how did we get here? And then the book actively having to backtrack to explain how we got there. That one is going to feel like quite a shift. Things are going to be very confusing. It's going to be a bit less dramatic from that into the ascension factor, and a lot of that is because of the amount of time that transpires between books. Not much transpires between the events of the Lazarus effect and the ascension factor, but quite a lot. In fact, I'm not sure how much. A substantial amount occurs between the Jesus incident and the Lazarus effect. Literally infinite amounts of time happen between Destination Void and the Jesus incident, so it's kind of compressing. It's compressing down. I'll be interested when we get to the end of the Jesus incident to find out what people's thoughts are on what exactly Ship wants. Because I think there's something different to be gleaned from just about anyone. Ship's fairly fascinating. The way Ship comports itself is pretty rad. I'm very fond of that, of this portrayal of this questioning omnipotent deity that's like, yeah, I can bend space and time to my will. Why would I interfere with another sentient life form trying to self-determine? I don't have to do that. I could do that. But what would be the point? What would be the artistry in doing that? What would be, why? Why would I do such a thing? Why do I want you to find out how to worship me? What are we doing here? So it's sort of teacher, but there's more going on there, and I think it's a surprisingly, for me, I think it's I can't talk about that. We'll talk about that next week. I don't want to spoil anything. But I'll be interested. I am not enunciating my consonants very well. I will be interested to see what people take from it all, because I think it's a fascinating series. Some very interesting character studies, some very fun characters, some very cool events, and a excellent setting. I do have to remember, though, I have got to find images of those opening map pages that are in here. You can see why it's called the egg. You can see why it is. You can see a map that explains a bunch of different information of Pandora itself. Now, where does it show? Yeah, it shows the losses. Anyway, let me do. Let's see if I can find real quick. Whoops. Might be able to extract one of the pages from a PDF, and that might have it. Let's find out. Oh, Internet Archive. Please remain useful to me. Oh, hey, that's my edition. Yay! If that's a PDF, we should be able to get that. No suitable files. Why did you even have... Oh, that's right. Internet Archive is under siege right now. So if you like your internet libraries readily accessible and free use for anyone, this will... Well, it is what it is. Anyway, I will endeavor to find a PDF. I will endeavor to find images of those for at least the final one that we do here for this book, so you have some idea. The map will be totally irrelevant come the Lazarus effect, for reasons that may be dawning on you already, but will become abundantly clear by then. With that, I'm going to run. Next week, we'll be reading through more of Manfac by Martin Caden. Now that our protagonist has gone through his wrestling arc, we'll see where he goes from here. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do next Wednesday. Right now, tentatively, I'm going to do Permutation City by Greg Egan, because I have read distressingly few of his novels on stream, just mostly his short story collections. In fact, I've gone through all but one of his short story collections. Mostly this is because I'm extremely fond of his short story collections. Let me think here. I think that's it. Oh, yeah, and next Friday will be the final installment of The Jesus Incident by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom, so feel free to tune into that. If you ever are wondering why these are so rough, and you're listening to them after I've done them, that's because I do these live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I try to start at about 12 noon U.S. East Coast time, Eastern Standard or Eastern Daily, whichever it winds up being. UTC minus 5 or 6. Something along those lines. And so you can catch me live then. I've lately been like at least 15 minutes late, which is embarrassing. I'm trying to remedy that. We'll get on the ball eventually. At any rate, that'll do it for me. That will do it for me today. We will resume this later. Thanks again to everyone who tuned in. Hope you are enjoying if you're an Amerikanski, hope you're enjoying a post-Thanksgiving doldrum and are not stressing your computer buying stuff too much. Remember, folks, ever read The Alchemist? I don't think I have. Let me read up on that real quick. The Alchemist. The novel is that from 1988 by Paulo Coelho? Cielo? How is that pronounced? If that's Brazilian, that could be Silo. I have not. Originally written in Portuguese, it became widely translated international bestseller. Story follows the shepherd boy Santiago through his journey through North Africa to the Egyptian pyramids after he dreams of finding treasure there. Ooh. Meets Melchizedek, King of Salem. I have to read this. This could be fun. This could be a lot of fun. I want to check this out. Thank you for the recommendation. I take recommendations all the time. Let me see if I can get a copy of that. Published in 88. One moment. The Alchemist. The Alchemist. Thank you, ABE Books, for not being Amazon. Here we go. Easy. Easy work. Many editions. I will then get around to it. I'll have to get a copy. Oh, they've got a graphic novel as well. Ooh. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Easy. Oh, yeah. I will spend more on shipping. Thank you. Third-party book market. No, I'll get a copy of that. Let me actually, real quick, open up my important documents folder here. Open up my streaming documents folder. And open up my... Where are you? Where's my requests list? Should I put that in the other folder? I'm not as organized as I could be. Here we go. There it is. Bop, bop. That is The Alchemist by... Let me make sure I spell this correctly. Kello? Maybe? Paulo. Kello. I will have to look up how that's pronounced. Portuguese does not come naturally to me. I regret to say. All right. Let me nix that. Let me move that down into the done category. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Okay. Oh man, I forgot that someone asked for Slaughterhouse 5 by Vonnegut. I definitely want to get around to that. Reading that on stream will be delightful. I would thoroughly enjoy that. Okay. Oh, we've done Frankenstein as well. Done. Whoops. Sorry, we're doing some quick editing. I do not have this in a spreadsheet at the moment. I just did it as a quick and dirty checklist text document. All right, there we go. All right, that is on the list. It is officially on the list, which means I will officially get around to it. You heard it here first, folks. A fable about following your dream. I like that. I like that. I want to say someone might have also asked for Olympus and Ilium by Dan Simmons, and I have those somewhere, but I have not gotten around to them yet. Anyway, I've got to get to Endymion by Dan Simmons first before I can do those. I have committed to doing that at some point. I don't know when that will be because it's taking me a bit longer to get through these two trilogies. The Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy by Xijin Liu and the Pandora sequence by Frank Herbert and Bill Ransom. It's taking me a bit longer to get through those than I had really mentally calculated. Mostly that's because I was using the amount of time it took me to get through the Rifters trilogy and the Area X/Southern Reach trilogy when I was doing those, trading off between those, and that was like half a year, and this is taking a bit longer than that because these are bulkier books. They are denser. They are denser tomes by and large than those are. Those are comparably. I'm losing my language centers. Comparatively short. When I think Rifters, the first Rifters novel, Starfish, comes in at like, I don't know, maybe 300 pages on the outside, 260 maybe. It's not super long. And I think that's one of the longer ones in the trilogy, bar the fact that Behemoth is like 2 books long. No, that's one of the shorter ones. When that one's like 250 and the Jesus incident is, I don't know, 400. So that gives some perspective anyway. Those were longer. So those were shorter. These are longer. These will take longer to get through. I was like, oh yeah, I will be doing Absolution come the start of the year on Free Read Fridays. No, 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 no. We might be doing that around the start of the year for Wordy Wednesdays. Because I do want to get around to that, because I did commit to doing that. So far, I've been able to sustain doing 3 reading streams of 3 separate books every single week. We'll see. We'll see if I decide that that's worth the effort next year. But so far, that is the plan. Is we are going to keep doing that, which means y'all are going to get lots of books. It means we're probably going to read some E&M Banks at some point. We're going to start getting some culture in, y'all. It's going to be fun. Oh my gosh, when we get to some of the bangers in that series. Ooh-wee! Y'all are going to get some Accession. Y'all are going to get some Look to Windward. Ugh. I find something to love about every single one of those, too. I find it very hard to go back and reread the last book in the series, The Hydrogen Sonata, because I just, like, implode knowing it's the last book in the series, and I think one of the last books he published before he died. Certainly the last book in the Culture series before he died. And I'm just like, I get towards the end, I'm like, oh my god, there's no more! What do I do? That sort of thing. Anyway,
If you remember how I was breaking down and crying back at the end of the Area X trilogy, or, during most of Hyperion, this is like that. It's going to be rough.
if, God forbid, we ever get that far, which maybe we will. Anyway, so yes, thank you for the suggestion. I will get around to that. I still have a bunch of stuff on my personal backlog. I'm still chipping away through The Nightland by William Hope Hodgson. I'm most of the way done that now. It's been busy. I have no real valid excuses. It's a slower going book mostly because of the way it's written. It's kind of like, oh, take it in doses. A chapter here, chapter there. Not taking too long to get through it, but between that and ramping up work schedule and other things, I have the time. I'm not using it well. After that, I don't remember what I had something that I had committed to read a while ago, but isn't for stream yet. I don't remember what it was offhand. Sorry. Actually, that was maybe it. I think somebody asked for the Old Man's War, so that might be one of them. I think that's on my docket, among other things. So many things. So many.
So many books, so little time. When can I upload my brain to the cloud and read all these at my digital immortal leisure? That is my question. This is my eternal question.
You can upload your brain to the cloud, but Monkey's paw. It's Amazon's cloud.
Oh, thanks. Death is preferable. Uh,
Or Facebook's cloud, or Google's cloud, or Elon Musk's cloud.
no thanks.
I'll enjoy death. Death would definitely be better.
Thank you. Goodbye. Ah, signing off of that mortal coil. Immortality at what cost? Anyway,
I'll take my chances. Let me put it that way. I will take my chances. In an afterlife, hypothetical or otherwise. I don't particularly believe in such a thing, but yeah, it's probably going to be better than a man-made torture dimension. I mean, advertising dimension. Same thing. Same thing to me.
no, there was something else. No, that's a commitment that I have for the stream. Street Lethal. I'm gonna get to that. I'm gonna try and fast track that. Get that done in the next month or two, 2 months. Because that one sounds like a lot of fun. Oh, that's what it was. It's the book about the sapient octopus enclave. Oh, what is that called? Mountain Under the Sea, I think. I've been meaning to read that for ages. I had it recommended to me forever ago, and I'm like, oh, I'll get around to it. I'll get around to it. I'll get it, and I'm getting around to it. Yeah, that's it. That's it for now. After we're done with Manfac, I have to coin toss and decide if I want to do the first volume of Full Metal Panic, which should go quite quickly. It looks like it's longer than it is because it's got kind of big print. It is fairly beefy, and it's also like 4 books. What do they call them? Light novels or so. It's around 4 in there. Entertaining rom-com / military thriller. It works. You'd be surprised at how well it works. I was surprised at how well it worked. I was like, oh wow, this reads very easily. I'd seen like the first season of the anime and was like, oh yeah, it's fun. I was shocked at how well it read. It's either that or Yukikaze, which isn't giant robots, but it is fighter jets through the dimensional portal in Antarctica. Y'all know about that one, right? Oh, you'll learn. I do. That's absolutely getting read at some point. I just don't know if I'll go to it right after Manfac. I kind of want to drag things back onto something resembling why I call it Mecha Mondays things, as opposed to all this stuff that's highly adjacent but not really people in giant robots. I've successfully managed to avoid reading any of the BattleTech novels, of which there are literally hundreds, at least dozens. There's a lot. There are so many. There are new ones being written. I did not know this until fairly recently. I was like, wait a minute, they're still making these? How? And then I'm like, well, it's how they made tabletop gaming stuff back then, particularly when it was in that vein, where you had to keep selling updated rule sets and whatnot, basically like Warhammer 40K does or BattleTech did. Is you'd release with your new dramatic the consequences will never be the same status quo shift. Read the clan invasion, read Word of Blake, read whatever jihad happened. One of those. There's another jihad. There's a more recent BattleTech jihad that I don't remember. I'm not up to date on the lore. Suffice it to say, you'd release promotional fluff books. And so BattleTech did a lot of that. Warhammer 40K got into that and is very famous for doing that now. I mean, you look at the Horus Heresy books and there's just, I don't know, 7 gorillion of them. I lost track very early when I realized I didn't actually care about the Horus Heresy era at all. I was like, oh, I thought this was a lot more fun when it was just background lore. Actually describing it in nauseating detail does nothing for me. It's the prequel syndrome. I'm not big on prequels, by and large. They have to do something really, really good for me to be like, okay, I accept you into my heart. And most of the time, they don't quite meet that barrier. And unfortunately, that's part of the problem I have with Absolution by Jeff Vandermeer, but that's okay. That one winds up changing
your perspective on things pretty dramatically. Whereas with 40K, I was much more content to be like, oh, things happened. It was bad. I don't need to know why it was bad. I don't need to know their reasonings. I don't need to hear the rationales. I don't need to hear what they were thinking at that time before they did the bad thing. I don't care. I just don't. I don't. I know the end result. And okay, part of the fun is figuring out how did they go from this goofy, affable guy to, oh, he's literally Space Satan. It'll be fine. You know, like the Star Wars prequel trilogy. It's an interesting journey. And it's like, well, it's actually not that interesting a journey, except when they're trying to make it an interesting journey, and then it gets silly, which unfortunately has always been a problem that 40K has skirted around with. It's one of the reasons I probably won't be reading any of those on stream. I could be persuaded to read either the Eisenhorn series or the Ravener series. Those are both pretty good. Some of Gaunt's Ghost. I realize I'm only listing Dan Abnett books. Um, Caiaphas Cain, of course, is a delightful, joyful romp. And there were one or two others that were pretty good that I derived some pleasure from. But by and large, it's not too likely that I'm going to read those on stream. Not that they're terrible or anything, but just, life's too short. Or whatever other reason. Also, they all already have books on tape. And they're all done by better narrators than me, probably. Yeah. Yes, Butcher Raffi? Sorry. It is a long stream. Mostly this is just me blathering. We're done the reading portion, so if you care about the actual book being read, you might want to rewind like 40 minutes. It's been a while. I try not to make these so long, but I kind of got onto a train of thought, and I can't get off the train. It's moving too fast. Just keeping people up to date. Plus, as the year comes to a close and my schedule increases, I might have unintended absences. I don't think those are going to happen, but they might. I should warn people that it is a possibility. So, back on track. I should really close because I do have things I have to get done. Thank you for saying good job. I do appreciate it. I take criticism well, so long as it's constructive. But I adore compliments. We take those. We like the ego stroking. We like it very much. What we don't care about, though, are like and subscribes. If you want to do those, go ahead. I'm not telling you what to do. I will never. Okay, he said the definitive article never. It is deeply unlikely, even though my subscription rates have been climbing. I don't know what it's up to. I'd have to look. He said, looking. I don't know what it's up to. I am likely never going to monetize this. I have bandied the idea about because some people have said that they'd be willing to donate money to me. I'd set up like a Patreon or something. But like I'm not going to tell people what to do. I want it to be totally of people's own volition with as little meddling in that process as possible. You can use the algorithm to boost me if you want, but I don't. It's not on my priority list. Like this isn't how I make money at all. This is a hobby. This is me enjoying myself. This is me having fun. It's effort, but it's something I actually enjoy doing. It's something I actually genuinely enjoy doing, as opposed to working to live. This is some. You could call it, ooh, it's content creation. You're making something. You're trying to express your. Nah, I mean, okay, sure, but like, these are wild, cool books, and I have them in my collection mostly, except for the ones that I don't. And people recommend to me that I don't have yet, that I have to get into my collection, and then we read those because people are like, hey, you're relevant to my interests. Read this relevant thing to my interest. At which point I say, hey, that sounds relevant to my interests. Let's go. So again, I don't get money from these. So liking or subscribing is entirely on your own recognizance for your own reasons. It's not like it's not something I ask for. It's not something, it's arguably not even something I really want, because every single time that I see more people are subscribed to the channel, I'm like, oh shit, we get that much closer to me having to decide whether or not I really want to stick it to the big Google. Uh, and to see if I can put my money where my mouth is. And frankly, I'm scared of what I might do. I think it's well, actually, I don't think I could. That gets into pretty sticky legal territory, doesn't it? Because then Google is getting a cut. I think technically they're getting a cut anyway based on traffic, and I don't really know how that works. I don't get a cut. Then I start getting a cut for providing a service that people should be paying money for actual books on tape, audiobooks, Audible, what have you. Whatever service you choose to use, there are many. And if any of them are hiring or want somebody who's, in their own apartment, who's just kind of doing their own fucking thing, using subpar equipment on their own, hey, hi, I'm here. If you want to do all the editing and shit, please be my guest so I don't have to. Thanks. Uh, um, where was I? Oh, right. The thought train. It's leaving me behind. Goodbye. Yeah. So I don't think I will, because it's sticky legal territory. I already had a brush with that. Right now, I think the one thing saving my collective legal bacon is that they're all live streamed and those fall under some different purview. I had one that was uploaded as a recorded video, and that was, I think, the first installment of Echopraxia by Peter Watts. And that had a takedown for copyright reasons, a copyright strike. So I took that down, and then I didn't go quite the nuclear option, but I took out that entire series, the entire book, because A, what's the point if the first installment isn't there? B, you know, I did not want further legal reprisals. It might have been like a warning shot, so to speak, and they were like, oh no, we'll give you like a zillion takedown requests and your whole channel will be shut down. And sure, I have most everything recorded. Not good recordings, unfortunately. Not great recordings, but they are recorded. So I can, and one of the other things I need to get around to doing is like setting up a Discord channel or something so that I can actually disseminate and distribute those to anybody who actually wants a hard copy, hard digital copy. Because I don't care, so long as you don't try to make money off of it. Or if you do, give me a cut. I realize I should be a bit more concerned about that, but at the same time, it's like, this is a lark for me in a lot of ways. Oh, well, why do that when you could get paid to do it? Well, because then it's something I'm obligated to do to get paid. And that changes the dynamic, don't you find? I find it changes the dynamic rather drastically. And it's not a positive change in my view. I don't want to do something because I have to do it. I want to do it because I enjoy doing it. Maybe that makes me a filthy commie or a socialist or something, or a hopeless idealist who believes in a utopian future or utopian reality that doesn't exist, but shit. Shame on me for reading too many culture novels by Ian M. Banks. And with that lovely cynical note, I'll see you all later. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. Wow, we rambled way too long. I am so sorry. Maybe next time we won't do that. Okay. With that, toodaloo. See you all later.